So welcome to the May 28th, 2019 school board meeting of the Shorewood School District. If anybody's interested, there will be a couple of opportunities, 3 opportunities for public comment, and there's a sign-up sheet up front if you're interested. So first order of business is to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
So I want to make 2 quick changes. We are going to have a presentation from Youth Rising Up after our passages reflection. So it's an announcement. So I think we'll let them come up and talk about an upcoming event. And then I wanted to table 4B, the updates on handbook appendices. There's additional ones that have been brought up. And so just to be able to get the full lineup of handbook appendices changes, I'd like to ask that we table that to the June 11th meeting. Any questions?
No.
No.
I move we adopt the amended agenda.
Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Dr. Davis, can you remind us of our overarching result?
Yes, our overarching result for the School District of Shorewood is our students are leaders who challenge themselves to grow and achieve academically, pursue their passions, navigate change, learn continuously, and contribute to the common good.
Thanks. Awards and recognitions tonight.
Yeah, first I'd like to acknowledge the volunteer appreciation event that the district and the village co-hosted at Hubbard Park earlier this month. As part of that evening, the Spirit of Shorewood Awards, as they're called, were given out to volunteers whose commitment to service to our schools and village epitomizes the volunteer spirit of our community. One award was given out to a village volunteer, and one award was given out to a district volunteer. So congratulations to the district award winner, Nancy Beck Bamberg, and the village award winner, Judy Spencer. So thank you again for all the volunteers who make this district and community a better place. So we appreciate your continued support. Next, I want to recognize those who participated in and contributed to Buzz Cuts for cancer events last Friday to raise awareness of the need of childhood cancer research. 15 SHS students, 11 of which were females, and Principal Kenny agreed to literally make a change by collecting donations from friends, family, and businesses and exchanging them for buzzing their hair off. So it was great to see all these high school students have so much drive and raise money and the courage to fulfill their buzz cuts for such a noble cause. So congratulations to all the students and staff who participated and to those who donated to the cause. Also like to acknowledge all of those who participated in or helped out in the SHS Spring Musical, Mamma Mia, 2 weekends ago. We had a great turnout for all the performances, and I'd like to especially thank all the senior drama students who gave their last performance of their high school career on Saturday night. So congratulations to all those students, and well done. Congrats to the SHS girls track and field team who finished second in the WIA sectional meet, giving them a berth in the WIA state meet in lacrosse this coming Friday and Saturday. We had an SHS athlete in every single running event at the sectional meet, and we had the highest place finish in sectional history since Coach Dom Newman has been coaching here. So congratulations to the team overall. Additional congrats go to the individual state qualifiers, Eduardo Valdez in the 800 meters, Lucas Florsheim and JC Gray Hall in the 3200 meters, Felicity Haid in the 800 meter, Annika Elliott in the 1600 meter, Vionis Gwirowski, Kenya Gaston, Kendall Cull, and JC Gray Hall in the 4x100, Annika Elliott, Fiona Skowarski, Addie Kemp, and Felicity Haid in the 4x400, and Annika Elliott, Sophia O'Connor, Marcella Yatso, and Felicity Haid in the 4x800 relay. So congratulations and good luck to those athletes this coming weekend in lacrosse. Also, a huge congratulations to the Shorewood boys tennis team who won the Woodland Conference tournament earlier this month. Additionally, the #1 doubles team of John Ewing and Christopher Perry finished a perfect 23-0 on the season, and they won their sectional meet. So congratulations to them. They'll be now advancing to the WIA state meet in Madison this upcoming Friday and Saturday. So good luck to John and Christopher. And lastly, I want to congratulate the SHS varsity boys golf team who won their first Woodland East Conference championship ever this month. So great work, gentlemen. So that concludes our recognitions and announcement and awards for tonight. And then we also want to recognize some of the great work that our volunteers on from the SEED board and the SEED organization have provided for us throughout the year. So I'll ask Sarah McEnany to come up and talk a little bit about our SEED spring grants. Sarah.
If the green light's on, okay, there we go. So our last SEED board meeting, we approved $90,914 in our spring SEED grants. And I can go through those and also make sure that I get the PDF to you so you can upload it, and it'll also be on our website. But I'll give you a little background. SEED classroom grants, which are for teachers, have 2 cycles. One is in the fall, and that teachers write letters of inquiry, and it's for immediate classroom needs that may not have been foreseen, and those are for $5,000 or less. And in the fall time, we granted, I think, approximately $15,000 to teachers who wrote classroom grants. And our spring cycle, those classroom grant applications get submitted by January 15th. And I'm not on the grant committee, I'm on the fundraising of the annual fund, but grant committee then goes through those grants and then approves or doesn't approve. And I think of the 13 grants that teachers wrote, all of them were approved. So the big one is wireless microphone replacements for the drama department at $44,000. The numbers will range. The teachers determine, they write reports, and then they come and give presentations. Each school has received classroom grants, and I can go up through all 13 of them for you, or I can upload it. I don't want to waste people's time. But the classroom grants are really getting the money to the teachers, and the teachers really do that process. SEED has given back approximately, through all of the work of the board members, which is completely nonprofit, and volunteers, and all of the donors, we give back approximately $200K a year to the 4 schools and the district. And Swing is one of the larger fundraising events, and our annual fund is the largest. And I just want to let you know that we aren't done with the annual fund till July 31st of this year, and we have a $150K goal. So thank you, and I can pass this around to you. And I'm sorry it wasn't an active link. I'll make sure you get that.
Thank you so much to SEED and all the donors for
The
your
donors
generous.
are it. I mean, it's the donors. We just, make that connection.
Yes, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so first up tonight on student achievement and results is an opportunity to hear about ongoing Shorewood passages. And so we have some students and maybe Mr. Schultz. Okay.
This is all about you, not about me. You guys take a seat. Just gonna squeeze in and give a little introduction here. Okay. Hi, my name is Nate Schultz. I'm the Authentic Learning Coordinator for the district, and as one of my responsibilities is to kind of coordinate the passages process that our 6th graders complete both at Atwater and Lake Bluff. It's the best part about my job because it is about celebration and it's about growth. And so I brought 4 students with me today to share about their reflections of how the passages went. So these 4 students are Atwater students currently, and they all successfully completed their passage last week. So I actually want to start with a round of applause because that was really, it takes a lot of courage. And so they're here tonight to
You just wait.
you just wait long enough. I wish that was everything. If you wait long enough, it'll go away.
Sounds like a seed
So-
application, right?
Improved sound.
Yeah, sounds like boring.
So a passage is an opportunity, like I said, for students to celebrate their growth and to really reflect on their time in elementary school. And so each student up here with me and every student, both at Atwater and Lake Bluff, take time in the spring to look back over their elementary time and how they've grown as a person and as a student, and then also reflect on what are they into, what are their passions, what are they all about. To prepare for this, students are guided by classroom teachers. So tonight, the 3 6th grade teachers from Atwater here as well. Jeff Cartier is over there, and Carrie Zaitoff and Christian Mistel are in the back hiding as well. Hopefully they're waving to get some recognition
Yes.
for this too. They're guided by their classroom teachers to think about and reflect on artifact selection throughout the process. And so not only do students have to reflect on how they've grown, but they have to prove it. They have to have some sort of artifact that accompanies that. And so the teachers really support the students through that process, looking for evidence of their learning and development. The passage presentation helps students to gain a greater understanding of themselves and as members of our community. And then by completing this reflection and presentation, we hope that our students feel empowered to take their lead in their own learning, that they are in control of their destiny, of their learning and who they are and what they're about in school. Students, after that reflection, they present to a panel of 3, which is a future teacher, someone from SIS or SHS, a Shorewood administrator, and a community member. And passages are also encouraged to, or family members are also encouraged to attend the passage as well. So that's a little bit over an overview. I'm gonna stop talking because I wanna hand it over to Justice, Netta, Isaiah, and Daphne.
All right.
Take
thank
it
you.
away.
Hello, my name is Justice Tomaszewski. I've been in Atwater for 9 years. I've been here for all the grades, so it's a little sad I have to leave Atwater, but SIS is something new, and I like doing new stuff. The part of passages that I enjoyed was the self-reflection, because it really brings out like who you are and how you can become a better student and a person. Also, it can show how your personality, or what you are proud of, and what you can get better at. What I learned from this experience is self-reflection, which is really important. I know this because I did not reflect when I was younger, and I got in trouble and stuff, and yeah. But I did not get better for a long time, but when I did do self-reflection, I got better. Things I found challenging in this process is the time and the effort. I found these things challenging because it did take a lot of time, and it was a big thing, and if you did not do a good job, you had to start from scratch and do it all over again, which put a lot of stress on me and I know on others.
Thank you.
During my passages experience, I learned a lot about my comfort zone. I learned more about what pushed me over the edge, which was all the stress leading up to passages. Passages also taught me that I could speak to the panel very clearly because I learned that speaking wasn't the issue. I learned that my comfort zone has a lot to do with things that I can do individually. I thought before that speaking in front of the panel was what I was most worried about. I was incorrect, and I found out that the thing that really pushed me out of my comfort zone was what they were going to say about my presentation and what feedback they were going to give me. The feedback I got to celebrate was about the questions at the end of my passage presentation. The panel said that I had a good, well-developed response. I remember that one of my questions was why getting a C- on a piece of work was a good thing. At first I was really confused, but then I rebounded on the question. My panel said that they were impressed with my answer, and I was really proud of myself and mirthful for my momentary victory.
What I like in general about passages is it gives you that adrenaline rush that you need, like being scared, nervous, and happy. Some of these things help people in the long run. I'm the type of guy who likes scare every once in a while. And this had me scared. I thought I would have to redo it. I really did not want to redo this. I would not mind, but I just did not want to. I really liked the process because it was fun getting friends to reread it to me and tell me what I needed to fix. I got a lot of feedback from everyone, including the teachers. My panel all gave me good feedback and said I did well. Now that I'm done with this, I feel great because I did good, and I could use this in the future to get a job.
Hi, my name is Daphne Hammerland. I learned many things throughout this experience, but the thing that I learned the biggest thing that I learned was that something can be scary and hard, but doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, because you could really learn something from it. The thing that I found most challenging was to read my passage in front of the panel. It helped me get over my stage fright. In my passage, I said that when I'm doing something hard, that quitting wouldn't even cross my mind. I learned that quitting would cross my mind, and I had to think of ways that would help me get through the hard times, but not quit. Before I started this, I really was scared and I really didn't want to do it. I thought that I wouldn't pass and that I'd mess up when I was reading. But I didn't mess up, and I'm looking forward to doing it in a couple of years.
Well done. So can we ask you guys a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I was just gonna say that I'm sorry to hear that it was stressful and that it made you guys worry. But I'm really impressed that you came here tonight to kind of do it again in some respects. So well done. Thank you for coming. I was curious though, I wanted to ask if you had any suggestions on ways to make it less stressful so that other kids don't have to have that stress. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I think that one thing is that in the week leading up to passages, there was like a million deadlines, and they were all for like a lot of big projects. And I think that the teachers some of the teachers overemphasize it a lot because they want you to like be prepared and be ready. But I feel like that puts a lot more stress on us because they're. I remember the transition from 5th grade to 6th grade. In 5th grade, the teachers are like, in 6th grade, it's like a whole new world, and you're gonna have to work like twice as hard, which is true, but it's a lot stressful for the children because you don't really know what it's like, and it's a new thing. And when people kind of like push you towards the end that it's going to be stressful, it ends up kind of being more stressful.
Okay. Did you have anything else to add? No? So I wanted to ask, Daphne noted that in 2 years you guys get to do this again, and then 3 years after that, one more time. What is something that you guys learned this time around that you feel like it's going to help you the next time?
Like I said in my thing, that I thought it was really scary and I didn't want to do it at first, but what was the question?
Is there something that you think you learned this time around that's going to help you when you have to do it again?
Well, I learned that it's scary, but for the next time in the future that I'm gonna know it's scary, but it doesn't mean I shouldn't do it, and I should still work hard. And I know that I'll get through it because I already did it before, and I did it before, and it was my first time, so I know that I can do it again because it'll be my second time.
Nice.
I would just like to add, I loved what you shared. Justice, good seeing you. I haven't seen you in a million years. I was your soccer coach a long time ago. I didn't recognize you right away. But I did want to say that I think teachers in general are obligated to say that the next year is going to be tougher. And I'm sure your 6th graders, teachers have said that, I'm not sure, but perhaps they have about the middle school. And the middle school teachers, guess what they're going to say about high school?
It's gonna be harder.
And it's not that it's harder, it's just that you're maturing and things are just more level appropriate. You're gonna do fine. It's not gonna, what was this year twice as hard as last year? No. All right, so keep that in mind, and not to say I don't wanna send a message that you shouldn't take school seriously, but just relax. It's gonna be level appropriate, it's age appropriate, you're gonna be fine. They're not gonna throw curveballs at you. what you did today, you should be very proud of. Talking about stepping out of your comfort zone, learning how to take risks, pushing yourselves, Justice saying loving the self-reflection, even if something's scary, you can learn from it. Those are the big lessons I want you to take, and that we want you to take with you as you move forward. So keep asking those tough questions and reflecting. You're going to do great in middle school. And I guess if I want to ask one question. What are you most looking forward to next year when you get to the middle school? Anetta? Lockers. Justice?
Gym half the year.
Gym half the year? Okay.
Every day.
All right. Isaiah, do you have anything?
French.
French.
Nice.
Okay. And Daphne?
All the sport opportunities.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, take advantage of all the sport opportunities, and there's going to be more and more as you go from the middle school to the high school. So be involved. Get involved in the myriad of clubs that they have, and that's a really good way of making the time go by well and to get connected. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So just quickly, I just wanted to recognize the staff, because this is a project that's been, this is the second year that we've had this project. And from a sixth grade teacher standpoint, I just want to congratulate all of you for all the hard work. I know you guys have put in a lot of extra time to be able to create that. So let's give them a round of applause. And also to recognize that this is the whole school effort. It's not just a sixth grade effort. That's as students are coming through, this is really a reflection on their elementary experience. So as we get farther and farther down the road here, we'll continue to do that. And we had a lot of staff that weren't directly involved with students this year as sixth graders, but had these students in the past that have served on the panel that were really insightful. And I was in on Thursday and saw students just light up when their former teachers were part of the passages and could see that, and the pride that creates is pretty special. So thank you for all the staff to be able to participate in that. So just wanted to note that quick.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
And now we're going to call up students who are here representing Youth Rising Up.
This isn't a Youth Rising Up event, but it is organized by students who some of us are a part of Youth Rising Up. So me and Alex have been a part of planning this.
So what we've planned is what we call a Can You Hear Us Now Unity Rally, which has sprung off just events that have happened in this year around like racial issues and just things that people need to be more aware of. So we brought some students together and we came up with some what we like to call SMART goals, which includes learning gap, policing, and microaggressions, which will be talked about on May 31st, this Friday at 11 o'clock on the front field.
And starting that off would just be me giving an introduction on letting everybody know why we're doing this. We want it to be talked about more, and we want we've talked about it enough, and the students who came together came up with this idea. We want actions to be taken, so we'll talk about that, and then we'll have Alex will be speaking. And 3 other students who will be giving a speech on they're telling their stories on what's happened to them in this school district and in this community, and them giving their goals on what they want to see changed before they leave out of Shorewood High School. And then after that, we'll be marching to Atwater Park, where we will be doing community building activities with different schools who are planning on coming. There's about like 3 or 4 schools who'll be attending, and we're going to have some community bonding games and to come up with solutions to change the world.
Well,
we'll also have speakers at Atwater Park, such as Lena Taylor and David Bowen, who will be attending and speaking on just racial equality in just the Milwaukee area and in Shorewood, since it is their district. So we just excellent.
And we also have a poet who's coming, who will be a speaker at Atwater. So,
Great.
Great.
you guys are all invited.
Thank you.
What time's it at again?
Starts at 11 here, right?
Yeah, here.
Do you guys know, are the other students from the other schools that are participating in Atwater, are they also holding rallies at their schools, or is it very, I think King's probably out already,
Yeah.
right? But I just wasn't sure if the other schools were doing that or not.
I don't
We
think so.
encourage them
We
to.
encourage them to
Okay.
do it, but I don't think any of them actually,
So they'll,
yeah.
yeah,
Just
so
meet us there.
they'll meet you, got it, okay.
Great.
And how long does it last?
It's from,
For
at
the
Atwater, it's
estimate?
from 12 to 3.
Gotcha.
The actions that you're asking for, I don't know if you're ready to give them away, but are there things that you're looking for from the school board specifically, or more administration, or the community as a whole, or like all of the above?
Probably all of the above.
Okay.
I can give just a snippet of each one from what everybody's talked about. For our learning gap, we've talked about having more diverse teaching staff in the district and having tutoring programs after school so that the learning gap camp wouldn't be so big and that people get the help that they need and support that they need. For microaggressions, we've talked about just raising awareness on different people's cultures so that it's not such a huge or like shunned away topic to talk about race.
Having more things put in place that, involve students and teachers and administrators, so we're all like on one page.
And for the policing, we talked about just having the police and the Shore community build relationships with the students at the school.
Mainly Black students or minority students.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Thanks for supporting us.
Okay, public comments? Did they sign up? No, okay. All right, so first up for district operations is a review of our annual food service. Discuss this, having this presentation at the last meeting, so.
Thanks for having us here tonight. It's actually my great pleasure to have Molly Borton with me tonight to go through some of the slides that she went through with our annual review. I believe that we've had an outstanding year in our first year partnership with Airmark. You'll see some of the results that we've been able to track since they began in September. I believe that they definitely walked the talk that they had, or that they presented to us in the interview process. If I can go back a little more than 12 months ago, when we were conducting our interviews, one of the things that set Airmark apart was their the fact that they actually brought a plan, other than, well, we're gonna work really hard for you and we're gonna make really good food. Which, and I know I'm oversimplifying what the other vendors, and I have the utmost respect for the other vendors, but in a nutshell, that's what they told us. We're gonna make really good food and we're gonna work really hard, which if you're not gonna do those two things, I think you're in the wrong business. Airmark actually came to us and said, this is what our plan is with how to turn around food service in the Shorewood School District. And that was what impressed me. That's what I have, one of the things that I've keyed in on with all of the calls, the reference calls that I have got from Airmark. And I believe that Molly and her crew here in Shorewood have done an outstanding job, and I believe that the leadership at Airmark with their commitment to the Shorewood School District has proved very positive. And as a matter of fact, there have been quite a number of other food services that have come to actually look at Shorewood to see what they should be doing in their schools. So that, to me, is a remarkable turnaround in a year. So with that kickoff, I'm going to have Molly Borton go through a few of the slides that she went through with us, and then give you a chance to ask her some questions.
All right. So like Pat said, this was a presentation, sort of a brief version of a presentation that we gave as a client business review a couple weeks ago with our regional or district manager who was in attendance as well. And the goal of this is to sort of sum up our year. You'll see the financials in here that actually date till the end of our fiscal April. And then actually we just wrapped up our fiscal May as well, so I'll comment on some additions to the numbers you'll see. And then, you know, it goes through looking forward to what do we plan to do next year. We had a great first year here, as Pat has said, and we're really excited to be here. And I think that the turnaround that we've seen in the initial year to begin with speaks to what's to come. So you can skip forward. So this will, the things we'll talk about here are some of the promotions that we've run throughout the year and how those have impacted our meals and our participation from students within the district. We'll talk about financials as well, which will probably get a little too granular for people that are not so interested in that. And then just our overall metrics of our account. So you'll see this is our, like I said, this dates till the end of our fiscal April. And so this is sort of how we track our financials throughout the year. Without going into all the details, one of the things I definitely want to highlight that we focus on is a food cost per meal that helps us to control our profit at the end of the year. And one of the things we focus on there is using commodities. So we have, depending on the year, in this district, we have about $30,000 worth of commodities that we receive from the government that we have to use. And we go through a process to select those for the following year. So actually we went through a process a couple months ago where we basically chose the food that we're going to receive, or at least the $30,000 worth for this upcoming year. So that helps us to control our food costs in addition to the food that we purchase to supplement that. And then at the bottom there, you'll see our profit for the year, and actually as of the end of our fiscal May that we just wrapped up, we are just over $50,000 in profit for the year. And really the goal of the food service program is that it's a self-sustaining program. The idea is not to, have any of the profit that we are able to make is put back into the program. So it's used to replace equipment or, better the program and whatever is needed, whether it's replacing small wares or that type of thing. So the idea of this account, which is a Fund 50, is that it's only used for food service. It's not used to buy new laptops or purchase any other items. The idea is that it's only funding the program itself. And so with this money this year, we're able to pay off an oven that we purchased here at the beginning of the year at the high school. We'll look to be putting that same oven in actually as part of the referendum process at the other schools as well.
That was, just to kind of butt in here, that was actually one of the district commitments that we made to Airmark as they came in and made commitments to us. Our cooking equipment in the high school was, to say the least, obsolete. And I think that's probably being nice. And so the district actually committed to about $35,000 worth of new cooking equipment in the high school in order for us to get to this point. So what's key about this financial page is, as of April, we've paid for the improvements that we made in the high school. which is pretty important.
If I could just jump in here, first of all, I want to thank you for coming. This is the first time in my 2+ years on the board that I remember having a presentation with the Director of Food Services. So, quick question, this one's more at Pat. I really love seeing that number. Could you give us an idea maybe of where that number had been under our previous vendor at this point? I believe our usership, which we'll see in a little bit, has gone up significantly, which is why we're in such a good spot. But just to give us and everyone a perspective, could you share a little bit of where we were at this point previously?
Sure. By this point with our previous vendor, we were anywheres from, I would say, $5,000 to $20,000 behind yet. The food service program in Shorewood has not been a profitable program in over a decade.
I think that perspective's helpful. And then I guess one more question, this one's for Molly. I know when you came in this year, the $30,000 of commodities had been purchased, which it tied your hands a little bit in terms of how much flexibility you had. I know everybody expected, like, what the outpost offers immediately on day one. And because of some of those decisions, and that may never ever happen, but what do you foresee happening now that you've had a hand in kind of identifying where that 30,000 will go? Or do you see a shift, or are you?
Yeah, so the commodity process, just to be clear, is, you have certain items to choose from, and I've said this to a few people, that some of the items are not quinoa or fresh, locally grown meat products. So, there are only certain items we can choose from. One of the things that, or a few things that we focused on, unfortunately, we came into the district with a lot of pork products that were chosen for this year, for the 18-19 school year, and we typically do not serve pork at all within the district, and so with the exception of pepperoni sometimes, but we're really sensitive to that, so it's usually turkey meatballs, turkey hot dogs, things like that, so that kids don't have to worry about whether or not there's pork in the product. So right now, that's something that we, looking ahead to next year, of course, did not choose, but that did set us back in terms of items that we could use. We were able to trade that within different districts, though, which is a nice feature. We can, call up another school district and trade dollar for dollar if they have other commodities that they're not using. But looking ahead, we were able to participate in a direct diversion program, which, without going into details, allows us to partner with certain vendors such as Tyson for all of our chicken products, so that there's consistency in the products that we receive. Basically, we would divert a certain amount of our commodity dollars to chicken, and then we can choose whether we want those as grilled chicken fajita strips, chicken patties, chicken nuggets, things like that, whole grain breaded items that are consistently from Tyson, as opposed to in the past, when the items were not direct diverted, which was the way that the previous vendor did things. If you allotted a certain amount of dollars towards chicken, it came from any possible vendor that had chicken products, so there was no consistency. So a chicken patty might taste different one month versus the following month you get something completely different from a different vendor. And kids are sensitive to that, believe it or not. Why does the chicken taste different, or why do the burgers taste different? So Aramark, we have great buying power in that sense, that we'll have a lot of consistency with the products next year. And yes, we cut way back on canned fruit products and frozen vegetable products, things like that we will look to purchase fresh, instead of allotting so many commodity dollars towards canned fruit products. So like I said, we can control that, and instead we purchase sort of fresh frozen product, for lack of better term. So frozen blueberries that have no added sugar or anything, as opposed to canned peaches and pears and things like that. We really have steered away from that for next year. So those are a few of the adjustments that are made, but like I said, there's only so much within the commodity realm that we're able to choose. So it is free food to us, so you can only have so much control in terms of what we get, but it will look way different next year, and I'm looking forward to being able to utilize the product better.
Before we go on to the next slide, I want to emphasize whenever I talk about profits with, for example, food service, I think that there's a common misconception that we're all about the bottom line, and while that may be partially true, it's only true in that without a positive bottom line, if you go into our elementary kitchens in our kitchen at SIS and take a look at some of the equipment and take a look at the ovens that kind of work and the ovens that just don't work but they're still there, that's what happens when you're not concerned about a positive bottom line. You don't have the resources to be able to replace that equipment that's not working quite up to snuff, or that may not be working at all. One of the pieces that we took out of the high school kitchen didn't work at all. It was just holding down floor tiles. So when we talk about profit, understand we're not just here trying to make bucks. We're here trying to, have the capital in order to replace equipment.
What is our contract status? Like, because I remember last year that there was a choice of vendors, so now are we in the middle of a multi-year deal, or?
Well, we do not have to, we have to renew the contract every year. We do not have to go out to bid for 4 more years. So we don't have to go through any process other than
Unless we want to.
me saying, I think that this partnership is a good partnership and we're gonna renew the contract. In 4 more years, we actually have to go through the whole process of bidding this out again, regardless of whether we're happy with our vendor partnership or not. That's just what the DPI regulations are.
So you finished.
So looking ahead here, this is just something that we definitely want to highlight, is just our percent growth throughout the year so far. And again, this is through April, looking at the September meals versus the April meals. And one thing I want to stress here is that this is total meals, so breakfast and lunch meals. Breakfast is served at the intermediate school and the high school as well. And then also our meal equivalents, which is a la carte dollars converted into meals. So for every $3.58 worth of a la carte dollars counts as 1 meal, if that makes sense. So this is all of those numbers combined. It's not just a reimbursable breakfast or a lunch, it's everything. So at Atwater and Lake Bluff, it would include just lunch meals, because we don't sell a la carte besides milk that's 35 cents a carton. At the intermediate school and the high school, it would include any a la carte purchases along with breakfast and lunch meals. So you can see the growth throughout the year, and I think these percents have even grown after our May meals, especially at Atwater. We've seen a huge jump in participation. I just recognized my employees there that are actually new as of the past couple of months, who their counts have gone way up in the past couple of months, just with I think it's just the new energy and the new faces, and the kids are so excited. And we were doing about 148 meals a day. The other day we hit 184 meals there on a day that really wasn't even a very popular. I think maybe it was nachos or something, but it's just an amazing number. That's usually a number we would see more at Lake Bluff. So that's really exciting. And then just the high school, you can see that, yes, that number is true. We've had a 242% growth, and that's just since September. I want to highlight that in September and October, we did not yet have our Provisions on Demand unit, which is at the high school here. It was installed, I think it was on Halloween, actually. So starting in October, or actually fiscal November, is when we started to see a huge growth and jump in participation here at the high school, with the kids having access to that unit there for breakfast and for lunch daily. So that's where we've seen the most growth. And when Pat talked about us coming in with a plan, that was the plan. It was, capturing meals at the high school here and encouraging kids to stay on campus and eat, as opposed to going down the street to, Metro Market and Culver's and Mod Pizza and all those places, and to encourage them to, eat on campus and enjoy the food that we have for $3.10 a meal here at the high school, which includes their fruit and vegetable and a milk as well. And you can't get that anywhere else. So that's what I really want to highlight. We focused a lot on the high school this year, and we will be spreading that focus throughout the rest of the schools. Not that we haven't this year, but that was sort of the highlight of the year, was to grow the participation here with that unit. So this talks a little bit about our provisions on demand. The pod, if you haven't seen it yet, I would encourage you to come check it out at lunchtime. Not on a rainy, cold day, because it's really busy and really loud in there. It's definitely been a huge asset here, and the kids I know are still always excited about it. If we're introducing new menu items or trying something different, they're always in line talking about, hey, did you guys see that new bento box that they're offering? And so it's always an exciting day at the pod, and we look forward to presenting new menu items next year. I was actually in the process as a registered dietitian of coming up with new recipes that were approved by Aramark and through the DPI standards that we could implement here at the pod, and we've seen huge growth with some of those that are now used in other districts as well. So yeah, it's just, it's been a huge exciting topic here, and I'm really happy about the participation. That kids are happy to eat here, and that there's kids that are still bringing back Culver's or whatever food from local vendors, but a lot of the kids are also maybe just buying a snack or a beverage or tea or something like that to supplement their meal from home, which is great too. So
if I could just jump in about the high school, and we were around when you put in the pod, and remember seeing like the excitement and not only what it did in terms of offerings, diversifying the offerings, but it also created a space that we hadn't had before, right? So all of a sudden the atrium in the swimming pool, in the BHE pool, turned into like a spot to hang out, and administration went out and got tables and created this space, and it's done a lot to like integrate students a lot more.
Absolutely.
I guess I'm curious, because I have not been to the cafeteria underneath the gym. Have you seen like usership really decline there, and it really shift over to the pod area?
Yes, definitely yes, but we still have a certain amount of kids that love eating in the cafeteria down there. It's just sort of, I think, like their tradition, and they like the cafeteria style tables. They like that it's, I think, a little bit quieter, and so there's definitely there's kids that are still interested down there. It's not something that we're looking to take away at all. Actually, next year I would like to develop the space a little bit more. So, and yes, I would say that the vibe in the overall, the atrium and that whole area has just totally transformed, and thanks to mainly Pat and Tim Kenny, who had the tables ready to go by the time the pod was ready, and just the whole transformation was really exciting, just to see kids' faces, and kids that hadn't used their lunch account since elementary school and had no idea that they even still had a lunch pin or had money in their account, which was a pleasant surprise for some of them. But yes, we still feed a good amount of kids down in the basement area, but I would say a lot of the participation has migrated over to it's just the convenience, really. I think, especially in the winter, kids don't want to make the trek over there. So it's, and I've said to Pat recently, even if we offered these same items, that they look neat and they look like similar to what Metro Market might be selling, if we didn't have the pod unit, we were just selling them down in the cafeteria, we would not see the numbers that we're seeing. It's the space, and it's the ambiance, and just the new space that we've created over there that has contributed to the participation. I think you could be selling any and everything down there over there, and we wouldn't see the growth that we've seen. So
I'm gonna go ahead and ask, what ideas can you share some of your plans for that space to
let's talk about that towards the end. We're just sort of talking about plans for next year, so I'll comment on that then, if that's okay.
Yep.
This is just sort of some of the promotions that we've done throughout the year. So each month There's different SEPs or special event promotions that we like to run on our menus just to break up the monotony of our 5-week cycle. So, you can see National Pizza Day and, there's National Breakfast Week that we participate in, Dr. Seuss's birthday, different things like that that get kids excited. And we sort of follow a theme with, in April it's opening day for baseball, we might do hot dogs, things like that. And so this just sort of keeps kids interested and exciting about what's to come. And this just talks a little bit about and shows some pictures of caterings that we've done. I've been a huge advocate for Aramark catering since the year has started. I know possibly in the past with previous vendors, people didn't realize that Aramark can do caterings that are not school food. And so we've definitely highlighted that throughout the year and participated in doing sort of the welcome back breakfast, which happens every year at the end of August, and a few other items that we either have participated in monthly or so that we're able to offer meals for the staff as well. Actually, for the hot dog day that's coming up this Friday, we're doing all the food for that, which I think was done last year as well. But just having access to our to the catering services, there's a full catering menu, and then the nice thing about that too is that the catering dollars stay within the district. So as opposed to supporting Panera, or not that it's not great to support other vendors too, but all of that money and profit filters back into the program. And so keeping the money within the district, I think, is important, and that's something I've tried to stress as the year has progressed. So this highlights some of our employees. I'm really passionate, and I love all of my employees, and I remind them daily that they are the reason that we are successful. They all have great attitudes and they love to be here. We did inherit, for lack of a better term, some of the previous vendors' employees, and for the most part things have worked out. We did replace, like I said, 2 employees at Atwater recently who just weren't seeing eye to eye and decided to go their separate ways. But it was a smooth transition, and the upper right hand corner is Atwater there, and our employees that we sort of, one of them was at intermediate school previously and moved over as kind of our lead, and then another employee joined her, a new employee. So yeah, I think it's a fun thing to sort of keep the employees involved. They all they so much enjoy working with the kids. They all have great attitudes, and without them, we would not be what we are. So just talking about some of the innovation techniques that we've used to help support the program and grow throughout the year. So free and reduced lunch communications is something that we have available at Forms and Fees Day. So this is reminding any and everyone that qualifies for the program, whether it's a free or reduced, to apply, and that they not only would receive a free or reduced lunch, but that also applies to a breakfast program as well. So for students at the intermediate school and the high school, for example, this year would have that same qualifying status. So if they're receiving a free lunch, they also get a free breakfast. So a lot of our communication materials talk about that, and also reminding families to reapply because the benefits do expire. It's typically the second week of October, I believe, is the cycle. Just to remind families that the application must be filled out again, so that they don't lose those benefits and then all of a sudden end up in the hole with meals that they thought were going to be taken care of, but they end up losing their status. So it just helps to spread the information out there. And we have different back to school kits, which are always fun. So we actually this year, at the beginning of the year, I came up with a sort of a principles and administrative guide to Aramark, just introducing us to the district. And it's sort of a thick 30-page book that just introduced all of what Aramark is about and our mission and goals for the district. And so that was something that we started the year with. And also always having our menus available for the first of the year, our Forms and Fees Day, so that parents know what to expect. I know this year with the change in vendor, parents had a lot of questions and concerns about what was to come and what was going to change. And so having those communication tools available, not only in paper form, but also online as well, so that parents can regularly access those. This talks about some of the elementary school. Our ACE is our mascot at the elementary school, and any student that participates in our program likely has something from this year that has ACE on it, whether it's a chef hat or a pencil pouch or a keychain. Every month we do, actually we've been doing 2 days a month that we do a giveaway with their meal. So anyone that would take lunch that day would get, as you can see, the list of different little items there that they get. Curly straws was definitely a favorite. And so they can collect these items throughout the year, and it's just another reason to participate in school lunch. We do a different wellness promotion, so every month you'll see these posters up at the elementary schools. There's sort of a theme to remind kids about some type of wellness. So like being thankful, and which fits the November theme of Thanksgiving, exercising in January even though it's frigid out, and making sure you're getting enough sleep, things like that, staying hydrated. So these are all things that we like to remind kids of in a fun way at the elementary schools. Fuel promotions are items that we do only at the intermediate school and the high school. So these are items, and you can see each month has two different, there's a theme for the month, and then there's two different menu items that are on for 2 weeks throughout the month, so about half the month, where there's just something different that the kids get to see. So chili in the winter, and then there's different, like in March with March Madness, there's always a theme with some type of, something that fits that basketball. And you know, if it's an item that becomes popular, we end up putting it on the 5-week cycle menu so that kids see it more often. So that's always exciting too. We usually do a survey to see if kids liked it or if they didn't. And then, you know, I have mentioned this a few times, but just our special event promotions, and this just, like I said, it keeps things interesting and keeps the focus on food and different national pizza days and things that are going on, especially National Breakfast Week is something that the kids really look forward to. We do pretty much every day of that week for 5 days. We'll do breakfast for lunch, which is something they really like to see. So, and then looking forward to next year, and I know you had asked a question, Pablo, sort of about this, so we can talk about that at the end of the slide here. So at Atwater and Lake Bluff, the whispers are true. We are going to start a breakfast program in September is our goal. So this was something that we looked to implement this year in the spring, but it just didn't seem, not all the pieces fell into place for it to start in April. So we're fast forwarding to next year. This will be a grab and go snack pack. So it's not a hot breakfast. It's not pancakes with syrup. It's a simple grab and go breakfast pack that has non-perishable items in it. And then kids would be able to grab a milk with it as well. And like I said, any student who would qualify for a free or reduced lunch would also get this breakfast at a free or reduced cost as well. It's a wonderful program to participate in. The DPI encourages all schools to participate in it. It's making sure that kids are ready to start their day. We all know that kids are rushed out the door in the morning, they're not hungry, they forgot their breakfast, whatever it is. So this gives them the option to get to school and have something to eat. They can save it for later. If it's something that they wanna, there's different snack items in it that possibly they could eat after school or to supplement their lunch as well. So this is something that not all the details have been ironed out yet, but we're excited about it because it's definitely an asset to the program and to feeding kids as well. So kids that are hungry throughout the day and coming to school hungry, we all know they can't learn and retain information well. So making sure that they're fed is very important. At the intermediate school.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yeah.
And maybe this is to you. So how would this work? Like, are the doors gonna be open earlier? So like, if you wanna have breakfast and you go in through the cafeteria and you grab it? I mean, the intermediate school, or are they gonna make time in the classrooms
We'll have
to
to
eat
work through that.
breakfast?
We'll have to work through that with the
Yeah,
principals.
the details of it are, like I said, are not ironed out. We've had conversations, the principals are aware. Each school is gonna look a little bit different in terms of what time doors open. It's a snack cart, typically, if it's gonna happen. Lake Bluff has been explored, possibly going to happen within the cafeteria, or the gym is where it might be set up. Atwater, we're possibly looking at the front of the school. There's, like I said, the details are not ironed out yet. We have had meetings with principals and or staff at each school to discuss it. These are some of the questions and reasons why it did not happen in April.
And then it's not a, like, you pay for the breakfast. It's not that everybody automatically gets breakfast if they want it.
So the snack pack bags are $1.50 is the price of a breakfast, or like I said, or a reduced price is 30 cents for that. That includes their items that are in their bag, so it's usually 2 grain items, so it might be a Nutri-Grain bar, a granola bar of some kind, and there's always a fruit of some kind, unsweetened applesauce, raisins that are in that pack that help make it a reimbursable meal. And then in addition to that, kids can grab a milk, which must be offered per the DPI regulations, and typically a 4-ounce 100% juice carton as well, which is the kids sometimes have access to at lunch. That's on our menu once a week. It's a 100% juice carton that would also count as a half a cup of fruit with their meal if they'd like to take that. So.
Okay. Interesting.
The intermediate school, we're looking to possibly do a breakfast in the classroom type option to help kids. That's an issue there as well, where kids don't get there on time, and then breakfast isn't available anymore, and there's a very small window where kids can actually go in to get breakfast, and they forgot or they got there late. So possibly doing like bag deliveries to the classroom is something that we've considered. It was in place years ago at the intermediate school, and it was successful. So that's just something we've explored. Having a hot slider option available as well, where kids can see daily popular menu items as opposed to just the hot lunch item that's on there. So we've considered that, and there's an extra window at the intermediate school that would be a perfect place for that. So.
By slider, we're not talking little mini hamburgers. We're talking about the actual.
Yeah.
Device. The hot holding unit that's called a slider. The provisions on demand unit, so the pod, looking to have it open basically throughout the day through every passing period. Right now, we're open for breakfast, and then we open up at 10:30 typically, so we're ready to go for sort of the 4th hour passing period, and then we're open till about 12:45 or so. I've opened it after school a few days, and there's definitely kids that are interested in that as well. Right now, we just don't have the staffing to really offer that, but looking to do that for next year. And then the cafeteria downstairs over in the building there, we've looked at improving the look and the marketing, pizza stones, the slider option. We don't have any of that equipment over there now. So that's something to sort of change the look down there and give kids the opportunity to see something different. I think it's looked the same down there besides our marketing for a long time, and so just reviving that space and not really giving up on it is something that we'd like to focus on for next year as well. So.
And the idea that I had started to noodle over with Mr. Kenny, and it'll be up to the future folks that are in charge of this. But obviously everybody who's been in Shorewood for a while knows years ago that what is now the cafeteria, it used to be the youth center, and there was a soda fountain down there and booths and all that. And I thought it would be a neat transition if we could take a portion of that cafeteria and go back to some of that seating, almost kind of a retro look where there would potentially be some smaller tables with 4 chairs around it like we have up in where the pod is right now, but some booths with possibly some canister lighting, or get rid of the overhead lights and just make it more of a cafe that they could go down to. And again, just trying to create the ambiance that kids are looking for. They're not always just looking to go and sit on the same kind of a table that they've been sitting on in elementary school and middle school, but to give them a little bit more of a college feel, like you're going to, yeah.
2 quick questions. How has the pod affected, is it called the dog pound? What's the
Yeah, for our
resources by
special
the
ed
kids?
students, yeah.
How has that impacted their sales, and especially if the pod hours are increased? Does that
That would be
affect
something
them?
that we would have to work out with them. And I guess, I would, if there's some potential partnerships that we could do with them, I guess I would rather see that. One of the things that the food service is erroneously criticized for is exactly what's being sold there. I can tell you that the cookies that they're selling there are not whole wheat cookies or whole grain cookies or anything like that. And so that's something that we have to work out.
Because I would hate, while I don't mind taking money away from Metro Market, I would hate to take it away from a student group that uses it. So hopefully we can come up with a reasonable
There's always a way that
partnership.
we can partner with them.
And then
do something like
the
that.
Lake Bluff Kitchen Edition, when is that supposed to be done?
I'm trying to think of what's phase.
Yeah, I think that would be 2022.
Yeah.
I think would be
So
the
that wasn't
complete, would be the
expedited, that was through
completion of
the
that.
referendum timing.
Correct, yes, that was through the yeah, that'll be part of the referendum
So-
timeline.
We funded a new oven at SHS through the profits from the food service. So why couldn't we plan on using proceeds from food service to do that work?
Because we would have to run the food service for 10 years to have that profit in order to make those upgrades.
So the scale
So
of what
we
needs
could,
done is.
correct.
Okay.
So we could wait for 10 years to do that, or we could do it and have the benefit of it and then use that, the dollars that we are earning, the profits that we are earning to then maintain that equipment so that it doesn't get into such a condition that we have to pretty much redo every kitchen in the district. The hope in food service is not to let everything just fall apart, is to replace it when it has reached its useful life, and then you don't have to.
So we couldn't
do
do something
everything.
like lease or finance and pay for it with the annual proceeds?
Well, this would be something I don't know that I'd ever lease anything like this, but we would use the proceeds to purchase new pieces. We would use the proceeds, the profits that we would make in food service, for example, to keep our dishwashers at peak performance, to keep our ovens at peak performance, to keep our reach-in coolers that we have at all of the sites that don't have walk-in coolers at peak performance, to use our, for example, there's a hot well over at the intermediate school. Because the food service wasn't profitable, they skimped on the device that is over there. And so in order to change the water out of the hot well, you actually have to scoop it out. There's no drain plug or anything on it, a simple drain plug. They didn't spring for the device that had the drain in it. And so to be able to keep that material in good condition, you look at the pieces that you have in your kitchen that last for 10 years or 15 years or whatever, and you're cooking for 5 people. We're cooking for 150 people a day, and there's a tremendous amount of wear and tear on these particular devices, and no matter what you do, for example, in a dishwasher to soften the water and all of that stuff, there's still deposits that no matter what you do to maintain them, there's a point in time where booster heating pumps and all of that, it just wears out and it has to be replaced, and it's very, very expensive.
So, and just this is all, like, we own all this equipment, right? So this was all stuff that we bought and the prior vendor was just using it?
Correct. The only thing that we are still paying off is the pod.
Okay, and so the issues with the old equipment, that wasn't, I mean, was that up to the vendor to maintain? That was up to us to maintain?
It's up to us and the vendor to maintain.
Okay.
It was a partnership, and a partnership that was sorely dropped by our previous vendor on their way out the door. But they were responsible for cleaning the equipment, and we were responsible for maintaining the equipment.
The other question I had was just about transparency in terms of pricing. I know you've gotten some feedback about like the a la carte options and the capability for kids to go into the red pretty deeply on their accounts that their parents ostensibly pay. So I was interested if you've made any adjustments there, or what might be in store for next year, or any even just in terms of communicating with parents to help them understand what choices their kids have. I'm sensitive to this because my 12-year-old is going to be heading to SIS next year, and I'd like to not have a large Izzy bill.
Yep, so, since those discussions, that was something that we talked about at our recent, nutrition work group
Yeah.
meeting. If you look online, the intermediate school, list has changed in terms of, offering more details for the items that we do sell. There was already a detailed list, but I think parents were looking for exact items in terms of not just chips, but listing every single bag of chips that is sold. So that list was posted, a few weeks ago now, maybe a month ago, with more, just more detailed, items on there. So listing all of the frozen yogurt bars that we sell, things like that, because I know parents had some questions. In terms of next year and better communication, definitely having items, available at forms and fees days as well, and making sure that information is available on the website, that yes, you can turn off your student's ability, to purchase a la carte items without turning off their lunch account, in its entirety, so they could still purchase a meal, like a breakfast or a lunch, but not any additional items. And so that's something that we would make more clear. That's always been in place prior to me, prior to Airmark taking this over. It sounds like maybe in the past it wasn't as big of an issue, or kids weren't buying as much. I'm not sure where the disconnect is.
They were
but nothing
interested
has
in
changed.
better food means higher bills.
But that's
yeah.
through Infinite
Yeah.
Campus, right?
Yeah.
Like those,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? So I mean, I do think that more explanation of all the ways in which you can use Infinite Campus to kind of control, like
Right.
what is being
Yep.
spent and what isn't being spent, I think would be helpful, because I don't remember getting any of that during forms and fees when I signed up either, so.
Just be able to press a button and say you can't go into the red, like, I don't know, or.
Well, that
or
actually,
so
they will
much.
send
Can
you a lot of texts and emails about being low and or
balance.
50 cents under, but you also can just say, like, they only get $10, or you can like limit the amount of money they spend, right?
Yep. To shut off their ability to purchase a la carte, completely, it needs to go through me.
Okay.
So parents can't check a box, on the parent portal to do that. That would be a phone call or an email to me, which I've done on multiple accounts over the past few months or over this year in general. It's the click of a button. Unfortunately, it's the control that has to be done on the back end by me. And so making that more available and putting the information out there, like I said, I didn't realize, I think, I'll speak for myself, I didn't realize it was such an unknown piece of information, because nothing has changed. Infinite Campus is what's been being used. So like I said, I think it's the increase in participation in different items that are seen. Even though the previous vendor was participating in the National School Lunch Program, and had similar items, I think it's just that this year there's been the jump in activity in the kids' accounts. And so, I hear you and I understand that we have made some changes. It's hard to make drastic changes mid-year in terms of eliminating certain items completely, or so like I said, we've made more information available on the website, and so that's what's sort of being done for now. And I will look at, and already have started developing materials for forms and fees days that have all that information available on a document. So.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Miles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so next we're gonna get the 1920 budget update from Pat.
So we'll be here for the next few hours as we go through this page by page.
Line by line?
Of course, I'm kidding, because I would like to see my wife tonight, even though we'll be in the dark. So we have our 2020 fiscal year preliminary budget recommendation. Extensive book, where again, I believe that as I continue to get years of longitudinal data, that makes me very comfortable with what I'm presenting from the past and for the future. We're trying to roll out more and more detail in an effort to answer that all-important word, transparency. You'll notice in the beginning of the book, I started with just a copy of the executive summary. The executive summary that you have as a exhibit is actually the executive summary that I'm gonna be using at the next board meeting for the actual approval of the preliminary budget, and that is, I purposely keep that very simple because it essentially gives you everything that we need for that preliminary budget. It gives us our preliminary revenues and our preliminary expense projections. The second section, and I'm not going to go through this, but this is while dated, an excellent publication by the WASB. I have made raised some questions as to when they are going to actually redo this particular publication. That's in its 7th year. It's called School Finance 101. Since school finances can be quite confusing, we have revenues, but they're not all just straight revenues. Some of them are revenues that can be used for anything. Some of them are revenues that can only be used for certain things. Some of them can be used for all kids. Some of them can only be used for a small number of students. Some of them come from the state, some of them come from the federal government, some come from local taxes, some come from local fees and other sources. So I think it's just always a good idea to include this particular document in our preliminary budget that gets posted on board books so that people can educate themselves on school finances. One of the things in this particular book that I would like to highlight tonight, since every time I talk to the board about budgets, I try to teach something. If you would look at page 23 in the School Finance 101, it's actually in what would be the terms section or definitions. There's a term under tax credits called the school levy tax credit. So I want you to go home tonight and I want you to see if you can find your property tax bill. And if you can find your property tax bill, go ahead and pull that property tax bill out. And one of the things that you'll see there is the school levy tax credit. This is going to be a very important section in the upcoming years because we've gone to referendum where we've said that we're going to increase our revenue or our mill rate from 1388 to 1414. I think it was 1414. We're going to increase our mill rate. But if you look at that calculation that I set the levy on is never what a member of the village pays for their mill rate for the school tax. Because on your property tax, there is a section called the school levy tax credit that is a part of, it's a direct aid to the village from the state that reduces the amount of the actual dollars levied by the school district. And so, for example, this last year, even though our mill rate was $13.88, the actual mill rate calculation was somewhere in the $12, and I have to estimate it because I don't have a property tax bill for Shorewood, but it was somewhere in the mid $12. It was about an $8 million aid payment that came directly to the village, and what the village does with that is they subtract that aid amount from the bill that the district gives to them, and then they take what's left over, and that's what they apply to people's property tax. So, again, some of the little tidbits that you can learn in going through Wisconsin School Finance 101. Again, it's dated. The numbers really don't match the school district of Shorewood, but the concepts do. So,
Pat, can I ask, and you very well might not know this, and as you pointed out, that this is quite old, but it has in there that the average property tax on average, property taxes are about 41.4% of revenues for statewide. Do you know what that number is
I don't,
statewide
but
now?
you know what, if you would like me to bring that back when I go for the final
Sure.
presentation, I can find that out easily. I do believe it's a little bit higher than that, but it's probably pretty close as a state average.
Cause I was just curious, cause 41.4% and then we're what, 67%? We're going at 67%. So I was just curious statewide, how much more that's gone up in the
That's
last.
a really good question,
10
and I'll
years.
bring that at the next meeting when I bring this budget.
Thank you.
back. Okay, then we have the budget development calendar, just sort of a snapshot for you of what happens at what month during the fiscal year. So we are actually, I'm gonna call us at the beginning of the second column, because typically this budget doesn't come until the second board meeting. We don't officially approve the prelim until the second meeting of June. So we're about a month ahead on this particular document. We have our preliminary budget presented to the board. In July, we make 8 estimates, and we do our cash flow analysis so that in August, we're ready for the annual meeting budget hearing, which is probably going to be just a different form of this budget that you have before you. It is going to include all of the other funds. Typically, I have never brought anything but the educational funds for the preliminary budget. That's just been the habit that I've been in. It's not that I can't bring all of the other ones, but I just, you know, the lion's share of our budget comes from the education funds, and so I bring 10 and 27. September, we have third Friday count, summer school count, October aid certification, equalization aid certification. We finalize our cash flow borrowing after we adopt our final budget, certify the tax levy. November, we deliver the tax levy to the municipality, and in December, we have our final budget approved and submitted to the Department of Public Instruction. And in January, we start working on the budget for the next fiscal year. Then I also included on pages 26 and 27 a summary of the impact statements that we've already brought to the board, but just so that it's actually an official part of the preliminary budget. And then what everybody is waiting for, the budget summaries. We have 3 budget summaries included for you this year. This is one of those areas where what I try to do when I put a preliminary budget together, there are some school districts that will just always put just lockstep the same thing year after year after year after year. What I've always tried to do in my preliminary budgets is I do lockstep the Fund 10 and 27 revenue by source and expense by object. And just, you know, to give you an idea of the difference there, the source is from where do we get the money, and an object is what is the money supposed to be used for, okay? And then I do a Fund 10 or general fund and a Fund 27 special education fund by function. And what the function is why is the money being spent, what is its purpose? So those are the 2 things that I do lockstep. And then I always try to include something in the preliminary budget that seems to be something people have been asking for in the last calendar year. Last year, 2 things that were heavy on people's minds, that were being chattered and bantered about, both positively and negatively, were purchase services and facilities. And so last year, if you remember in this particular document I broke out purchase services in greater detail, and I broke out facilities expenses in greater detail. This year, the thing that I kept hearing over and over again is, why can't we have a full line item budget? Why can't we have a full line item budget? Why can't we have a full line item budget? Well, guess what? This year you have a full line item budget, and it's broken up into 2 sections. again, general ed and special education. I'm not gonna go through the budget summary by object or source and object. I would like to turn to the, actually, I think I am going to be. No, I wanna look at the, yes, it's budget by source and object. I do have a couple of pie charts in there, just to give you an idea of where we get our money from and where we spend our money, okay? So, in the general fund, 67% of our money is going to be coming from, local sources. And that's going to be both, local property tax and local revenues that we get, for example, dues and fees, things like that. State sources are 27%. Transfers from within Wisconsin are 4%. We get so little from the federal government that it doesn't even register as a percent. And then we have, and this is something that is part of the Wisconsin school finances directives. There are some sources of revenue and some expenses that just don't fit into these nice neat boxes that the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction has set up. And so they take all of those and they put them in a category called other. So we do have 2% of our revenue that are coming from sources that DPI just hasn't really come up with a good uniform way of reporting that. If you look at our expenses, salaries and benefits account for 78% of our budget, and then you can see the rest of those purchase services or operating transfer, that's from the general fund that goes to fund special education. That comes in a third place with 10%. Purchase services about 8%, and also understand that within purchase services are, for example, all the substitute teachers are calculated in purchase services because we use teachers on call. And a lot of the services that we provide through curriculum instruction come in the form of purchase services. And then you have all the smaller ones, non-capital objects, smaller objects that may come in, like in the form of technology, or may come in the form of a classroom device or tool or whatnot. At 3%, insurances for the district at 1%, and then we do have some debt retirement that's for our cash flow borrowing, our short-term borrowing, and then a few capital objects that don't even, register a full percent of the expenses.
So can we ask you some questions, Pat, about
Sure
the?
can.
So I just had a question about, I'm gonna forget where it is now. I think it was state aid.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going down in state aid about, I don't know if it's significant, but we've been going down, I guess, over time in categorical aid. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there's two key factors that impact the state aid that we get. The first is enrollment, the second is our property valuation. And so our enrollment has been, the last couple of years, we've had bubble years in 4K that have not recovered when they move to kindergarten. It does look like our 4K numbers are trending up this year. So hopefully that's just a 2-year period of time where there just weren't a whole lot of kids born. So enrollment is one of those. We actually, because we have had 2 years in a row of declining enrollment, we are actually going to get an additional revenue limit exemption this next year for declining enrollment, because after 2 years you actually start to realize some of that enrollment decline in the 3-year rolling average. As our enrollment has declined, our property values have gone up. Those two factors work against each other and result in losses in state aid.
Okay, and then what is refund of disbursements?
Refund of disbursements would be, it can be some of the items that we have for resale, or it can be other items that we have returned for a refund.
So how are we going from, because according to this, it was 60,000 in 18-19, and then 371,000 in 19-20?
I'm trying to think of where the jump in that is. We had one particular, this last year, we had our revaluation of our workers' comp insurance, and there was a sizable refund that we received from that. There are also some of the, for example, with our CISA contracts, we'll pay for a certain number of services or service hours, but if we don't utilize all of those service hours, they will refund those dollars to us.
And that would come up in the next year's budget? It wouldn't be like refunded in?
You know, we would see that in the current year's budget, so typically. So we have, just again, in looking at what we've had out there and what we have coming up this next year, we're anticipating that those
Oh, I see.
are going to be a little bit higher.
Okay. And then, in terms of expenses, so there was kind of two I thought interesting. One was about, and they were both around technology. So technology software services is going up a lot, and then technology equipment is going down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I don't know if this is part of like the technology plan or what that is getting at.
And I would probably have to, it'd be better if I had Mickey answer that particular question, but I do know that with a lot of the devices that we've purchased this year, and especially with the camera system upgrades that we've had this year, there are annual license fees that go along with those that is considered a software upgrade. And so I know that much of the software expenses are going to increase as our total pieces of technology increase. Another thing is we did a significant amount of installation of hardware this year that's also going to peel back into that last question that you had. One of those other revenues that comes in is called E-rate. The issue with E-rate is we have to spend the money to install the equipment, and it's usually going to be hardware. I should say it's always going to be hardware. They used to do some software years ago. Now it's all hardware. So I'm looking for example, this AP right above me, this access point, all of the access points in the district have been upgraded. We receive about a 40% rebate from E-rate, but the issue is we have to spend that money on that hardware, and then they will give us that money back. So where you're seeing a huge decline in the hardware expenses, because last year we had to buy all that hardware, where you're seeing that revenue come in, that seems a lot higher than anticipated, is because next year we're gonna get a rebate for the 40% of the cost of all of those pieces of hardware.
Okay, and then my last question, which is probably more trivial, is we're going from a budget of $5,000 for apparel to $150.
You asked my same question.
That seems really low.
Yeah.
I don't even know what apparel is.
Yeah, like,
I mean,
what?
what kind of apparel are we buying? I assume it's like the uniforms for
No.
I don't even think we buy uniforms.
And I'm just, can you tell me are you on the?
It's on the
That same
page
page.
1,
Okay.
line 42, under expenses.
Yeah, I believe, and again, what we're doing in that, I believe that was an account that was established over the years that was used to pay for, uniforms. But booster clubs and whatnot are helping our athletic department pay for
So we
that.
don't pay for that anymore?
And so what we're doing is it's not that we just eliminated that expense. One of the things that the booster clubs don't pay for is transportation. Transportation is something that the district has under budgeted for years. We've been trying to catch up with that. And so when we have these types of expense reductions, then we can kick more money into transportation for athletics. The apparel that goes for, like, the custodial staff receives a stipend for purchasing uniforms. That's in a different part of the budget.
Okay. And so where is transportation on here? Would that be under,
Yeah, transportation, you're going to, I think it's probably easier to find that in the functions. So if we go back to,
Oh, I found it. Page 37, pupil transportation athletics for Shorewood High School. I'm
Oh, you're
assuming
in
the high
the-
school. That's,
you're in the full line, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
okay. But
And I
there's no-
believe,
So $60,000, okay.
and that's not all, I mean, we use other transportation accounts that are in the high school for that as well.
I had a couple questions just to, so I could understand what I was looking for at. Would be an example of non-capital equipment at line 44?
So non-capital equipment is equipment that's going to be under the capitalization level, so it's going to be a piece of equipment that's under $5,000 that we would, and it's not an instructional piece of, or not an instructional device, it's something that, for example, if we have to buy a new hammer drill for the maintenance department, it's gonna fall under a non-capital.
Awesome, okay. And then the last line on that page, line 71, just says district insurance. What kind of insurance?
I'm sorry, can you tell me what page you're looking at?
The same page, that page one,
Page one.
the very bottom, district insurance. Because it went up quite a bit. I just didn't know if that was like general liability or workers' comp, the very bottom.
Yep, I just wanna get to the. Yeah, the increase in district insurance is coming in the form of increases in property casualty insurance and workers' comp insurance. So we did have a couple of years where our workers' comp, we had a great year last year and we're having a great year this year, but work comp goes on a 5-year average, and we've got a couple of bad years with, just a few injuries that ended up being very significant. And it's not so much the injury, it's the length of recovery and time off. So we have somebody that hurts a shoulder, for example. Shoulder recovery takes a long time, there's a lot of therapy involved, and, as, in Murphy's Law School District, if we have a right-handed custodian, guess what shoulder they're gonna mess up,
Right.
so.
Skipping to pay, let's see, the general fund by function. There were just a couple like categories I wanted to understand. The school building administration, so like, I'm looking at the general fund salaries. Is that principals, school building administration?
School building administration is going to be principals and their administrative assistants.
Okay.
So anything that goes under building, when we think of building administration, when you think of building administration in the budget, think of a little a, not a
Right.
big A.
Okay.
It's not the administrator sitting back there, it's what it takes to administrate that building.
Okay. And then central services are like you
Yep.
and Mickey and, okay, got it, okay.
And central services, yeah, that's, I would say would be district level.
And then operation under
Operations.
salary?
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Operations under,
Under the general fund salaries?
you're right, operations would be maintenance,
Oh, okay.
custodial maintenance, they fall under operations. I think what I should have put
Yeah.
in this document next year is a woofer manual.
Yeah.
That would really blow my minds.
So when you, I would just say like that, so this is helpful to some degree, but, the general fund and special ed are so restrictive, right, in what we can spend them on?
Actually, no, those are the most broad.
Oh, okay. You're right, sorry. One of the things though that I was interested in is sort of the other funds, so you said you're bringing those next time,
No, the other funds come at the annual
And-
meeting.
okay, so like Fund 80, those budgets, okay. So we won't really know what's slated for recreation until then, or,
And again, if that's a request that the board would have
Okay.
for us to put together, again, we scrambled to put this together a month ahead of time, so,
You
you know,
can do it.
again,
No,
getting
this
all
is
of those,
helpful.
getting
Yeah.
all of those budgets put together a month ahead of time is no small task.
thank you, because it's helpful. Okay, I was just curious about the other funds, but I understand your,
And what I
your
would,
way
s-
out.
well, and here's what I can tell you about the other funds, there really isn't going to be a large difference in those funds. Fund 80, I believe we're gonna be lowering our plans are to lower the levy for Fund 80 a little bit this year. We had a couple of repairs that we were planning for, this last year that will be completed, so I believe we're gonna be lowering the levy and lowering the expenses in Fund 80 this next year. Funds 38 and 39 are, I mean, they just are what they are. Fund 38 is going to be, I think it's around $280,000 for, the debt payment in Fund 38 and Fund 39, that's the one that's, going to be impacted by the referendum debt that we're going to be talking about at the next meeting. So that one, again, that levy is going to be staying relatively close to where it is right now. There's just a small increase that was approved by the
What's the special projects fund? I forget what number that is.
Special
20?
Projects Fund.
Yeah.
Those are like Fund 21 accounts. Those would be accounts that are established for, some of the accounts are like student activity accounts, but a
Okay.
student activity account can only be in Fund 60 if it is student-led and students make the decision on where the money goes. If it's a club or an organization, but that club or organization is more led by a teacher, and the teaching staff plays a role in determining where those resources are gonna be spent, then it has to be located in Fund 21. Fund 21 is also where, for example, if advancement gets a donation, SEED gives us money, and PTO gives us money to, you know, all of the money that we're getting from the Lake Bluff group gets deposited into Fund 21, the Special Projects Fund, and then we pay out of that particular fund. The benefit of doing that is that fund is not part of our shared cost.
Right.
And to keep those things out of our shared cost helps us from a state aid standpoint.
I think it'd be helpful for me just to understand like what's in there and what it's earmarked for. Even, I mean, given like we don't, you know, we're not gonna change that based on vote if something's slated for the playground or whatever, but just to know what's in there and then a reminder of like where it came from, where the gifts came from. Be helpful for me to understand, just like a one pager, not a.
Sure, that'd be great. I'll put that on Marta's list of things.
Okay. Well, okay.
It's very kind
Thank
of
you.
you.
She's getting a large list.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to understand that at the next meeting, this will be for board action to approve
Correct, this
the
will be for
preliminary
board
budget.
action. You're not going to get another copy of this, the whole thing. You're going to get an executive summary, and then it's going to be just a one-pager summary of expenses, revenues and expenses for 10, and a one-pager revenue expenses for Fund 27. They're already printed, everything ties out, you know, to all of these different reports. It's just, because you've already had this opportunity to go
Sure.
through this, I'm just gonna give you the exact
Okay,
sum.
so, and so if anybody else had additional questions, we should send them to you prior to the next meeting. Okay, thank you.
Oh, real quick,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, sorry, no, during the last biennium, I remember, you know, things had not been decided in Madison, and you took a very reasoned approach that ended up proving correct in terms of deciding on our budget, and a lot of
Mhm.
folks are kind of waiting to see. What are you basing this budget off of? Are you, what kind of assumptions of increase or?
Actually, the assumptions that I based this on were $200 in revenue limit, not $200, not any money in categorical aids, based on $200 in revenue limit and an increase to 30% funding in special education. And it just so happens that those are the two things that came out in the GOP proposal for the budget. So, I don't know if that makes me lucky or good. I'm
You
gonna
have an
take the
inside
latter.
line.
We don't know. Oh, yeah.
Well, again, and here's what some business managers are gonna say, well, they would rather plan for 150, and then they have that extra money. And my opinion is, we have needs in the district that we need to fund, and I would rather be spot on and not have any extra money, so that we've actually planned for all the revenue that we're anticipating. So, right now, it looks as if all of and you know, the assumption of health insurance being at a 0%, dental insurance at a 5%. We did, I can't remember what right offhand, what the increases were for, it was actual increases for our other insurances. So, you know, those are modest increases for, or actually, I had a static, student enrollment. We did put in the additional seats of open enrollment that were approved. So, again, I kept the assumptions as conservative as they could be, while still giving us what I feel is accurate a picture of what the dollars that we're actually going to have to spend, so that we don't come to, you know, October and go, oh, look, we've got extra money. We could have hired a school psychologist. But I guess we'll just have to wait for next year. I'd rather have that school psychologist.
So, as you pointed out earlier, our benefits and payroll are biggest costs, right? So benefits are about 22%. Can you talk to us about where Shorewood falls in terms of neighboring districts, in terms of benefits that we may or may not provide to our paraprofessionals? I know, you know, MPS, one of the lucrative things, if you can say that, about being a paraprofessional in MPS is that MPS does provide benefits to their paraprofessionals. My understanding is most suburban districts don't, and I'm just wondering, and then also, like, I don't even know that we're at $15 wage for our paraprofessionals, and if not, I'd like to get there. I know we have a new crossing guard company that's paying at least $15 to our crossing guards. So, could you share some insight as to what the status is for our paraprofessionals in terms of benefits and wages?
Sure. There are generally two ways that paraprofessionals are handled outside of Milwaukee Public Schools. And it's tough to get, it's tough to get folks into some of the Milwaukee public schools, and so what they do is they pay higher wages and they offer benefits. Up in the, you know, when you get into some of the North Shore districts, some of the suburban districts, there are essentially two categories of paraeducators or paraprofessionals. General school aides, which most school districts are going to keep under 5 hours a day. And then the only paraprofessionals that are actually being offered benefits are those paraprofessionals that are assigned to special education classrooms that have to be in there for the 7.5 hours a day.
Do we have any of those?
We
Of the latter, of the,
At this point in time, no, the district has not been able to fit into their budget offering paid benefits for paraprofessionals that are working over 6 hours a day.
do you know what the starting salary is?
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I believe it's somewhere in the area of $13.50.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Again, budgetarily, Shorewood is not without issues that it has to address in the future. It's plain and simple. But, you know, show me a district in the state of Wisconsin that doesn't have a budgetary challenge, and I believe you're going to find a unicorn, you know. So, it just depends on what districts are putting as their budgetary priority.
And you nailed it. I mean, that's a discussion that we're gonna need to have as a board is, or, you know, as we move forward, and like, what are our priorities and how much do we value our, in this case, specifically our paraprofessionals, and what does that compensate?
Because I can cost out what benefits would cost, but I can tell you that the only choice you have to fit that in your budget is to cut
Sure.
whatever is going to, you know, match that cost. Because, I mean, we've got a great copy machine in the business office, but I can't print 20s.
No, exactly. So those are some of the discussions that I think it's good for us to know, you know, at the very
It's a matter
least.
of priorities.
It is, but it's also good for us to know,
Yeah.
as a board specifically, you know, the hat I'm wearing right now, that, yeah, we have paras that are starting at $13.50 without benefits. Just let it simmer. But yeah, I appreciate your insight.
So before you go, Pat, I think you mentioned your successor. And so could you, and maybe this is for Brian, like talk a little bit about how that transition is gonna happen, and in what ways is Pat going to leave the list of things that need to still be attended to?
Yes, so assuming approval and within the next couple hours, so Marta would be starting July 1st. And so she was down last week. I had a conversation with Patrick. I think you guys have another day coming up, correct?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we're talking on the phone tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
We have an hour set aside.
Yeah, so we've got some regular, you know, mostly phone conversations just because of distance as we're moving
Sure.
forward. Some of the other important pieces from the business office standpoint are also the replacements of Jackie Wagner as our business office manager and a comptroller, Crystal Reed. So I had a conversation with two of the ladies that we have remaining in the office today, and with Marta, talking about being able to make sure that we'll have likely a couple week gap with Marta starting, our new staff starting, and doing some of the cross training just within the business office to make sure that we can keep things moving forward as far as postings and background checks and that type of thing. So that's some of the work that I'm having conversations with Marta and Jill and Cindy, who will be remaining in the business office, to make sure that none of the duties that we'll need to do late June, early July will get missed. So that would be at more of the day-to-day level. So Patrick's talking with Marta just about kind of bigger picture pieces, preparation for the audit, transition for the from the preliminary budget to the annual meeting, and some of those bigger things as we're moving forward.
And so then as a board, we should talk about like when, like we want to meet with her and talk about, especially the annual meeting. That's the second meeting in August.
Correct.
We only have one meeting in July. So that's our third board meeting with her, essentially.
Right.
And so are you guys comfortable with waiting till, like let her settle and wait until August? Or meet with her, sometime in July? So we should talk about that and make some plans about like when we want to do that. I'm sure it should be, I think there's lots to talk about. We could do it both times. So, but, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and just, providing an outline of what you are looking
Yeah.
for in that conversation and, what perspective she can provide, because it'll be, like drinking through a fire hose for a little bit, even though she's very experienced, just to be able to
Sure.
get, a sense of our priorities, and, any of those outline questions that she can get a head start on would be helpful
Okay.
for her.
And here's one of the benefits of working in the state of Wisconsin. The statutory requirements revolving around budgets are required of all the school districts. And so she's doing the things that she's going to have to do up in Rhinelander. So some of the terms may change, some of the codes may change, some of the phrases may change, but essentially she's going to be putting together the same thing. So while she's putting together her first annual meeting here, I'm going to be putting together my first annual meeting there.
Sure.
And both of them are going to be essentially centered around the same budget form. So. And I've had a nice conversation with Marta and told her that I'd help her out in any way. And I think she feels a lot more comfortable after our conversation last week. So I'll
Good.
try to keep that trajectory going tomorrow when I'm on the phone with her.
Great.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, equity, work update, so, kind of starting our standing agenda item, around equity work, both at the district level and the board level. So Brian, this is yours, or Tim's?
Yeah, I'll give an opportunity. Tim and I will tag team this. Just wanted to give you an update on some of the work that I've been doing with a group of staff members and a group of students, working on a definition of equity. Essentially, what does equity mean in our schools? I think getting a sense of getting a foundation of a common definition of equity between students, staff, and community members is an exercise that I've been working through with a group of staff members and students over the last 3 weeks, and then previously in some conversations with some community members around their definition. So hopefully we can finish that up with staff and students over the next couple weeks, and then I'm anticipating being able to have kind of a joint meeting with the 3 groups, hopefully sometime later in June, when we can get some common time together to be able to have some conversations about what we're seeing as our definition of equity, coming maybe from how is a student lens a little bit different than a staff lens, or a little bit different than a community lens, and then go work through a process to be able to get a common definition that we can work off of. So that's some of the work that we've been doing right now. I can tell you what's interesting between some of these meetings and then some of what I've heard also at the linkages is this real desire to get people together, kind of small groups, and talk about the work that needs to be done. And so I think that's something that we can also grow out of this process into our professional development as we're moving forward into next year, is getting into some of those dialogues about again, what equity is, what our expectations are, and then ultimately from a administrator standpoint, what supports are needed to be able to move forward on that work, and then be able to deliver that. So that's some of the work that I've been doing personally with a couple of groups, and then I wanted Tim to be able to share some of the opportunities from a staff standpoint that he's been working on and has wrapped up for the year.
Thanks. So this year we were able to offer 3 opportunities for our staff, kind of after school opportunities, if you will, that we had planned throughout last summer. And so through our work with the CAGC, the Closing the Achievement Gap Consortium, which is a consortium of schools and districts, about 30 plus around the area, all the way down to Kenosha, up to Mequon, and out to, starts to reach into the Muskego area. There's those districts and schools get together about once a month to discuss ways that we can all work together to collectively start to close the achievement gap. And so one of the subcommittees that they have in that group is called a book club or a book study group. And so last year I had the honor of running that group and heading it up. And it consisted of 1 member. So I ran myself well. Because I was the only one on that subcommittee. So we decided to do the Despite the Best Intentions book study with the Closing the Achievement Gap Consortium, and we decided to host it here in Shorewood conveniently. It was a really great location that the subcommittee decided on. And so really, we had a connection with Despite the Best Intentions author, Dr. John Diamond. He's a professor out of UW-Madison. And one of his coworkers, Dr. Beth Giles, had done our initial educator professional development session 2 years ago. Is good friends with Dr. Monica Kelsey Brown and Brown Deer, so we kind of got connected there. Dr. Beth Giles is a close follower and friend of Dr. Gloria Lansing Billings, who's really a phenomenal person to study and follow when it comes to all issues equity. So through lots of conversations with Dr. Giles, we were able to land a 4-session book study on Despite the Best Intentions, and we spread those out over the year. So each quarter we had a session where we could meet with Dr. Giles or Dr. Diamond. The first one, Dr. Diamond opened with a race and expectations, how do they matter in education? It was very foundational speech about some of the reasons race and equity matter in the greater Milwaukee area. It was actually really, really interesting for staff to see the crossover of a lot of work that we have been doing and the information that Dr. Diamond was sharing. He shared the housing covenants that happened right here in Shorewood up until the 1940s, which a lot of our staff had seen in previous years, but it was reaffirming to know that someone like Dr. Diamond had also noticed this and thought it was important to share why that work is so important. Our second session, Equity at the Forefront, a walk through a school and school day where Dr. Giles kind of put out a call to action for each person within that book study to notice inequity in your schools. What does inequity look like in your schools? Follow the students, right? So is there an AP hallway? Who's in the office? Notice inequity in your schools and just put that lens on and look around your school and try to find areas where inequity may exist. So that was a bit of a call to action for all of our participants. The remaining 2 sessions, I'm not sure who we made angry, but literally there were snowstorms at both sessions. And the last one was like the freak 5 o'clock 2-inch dump in April. So we had lower enrollment at those. Our friends in Whitefish Bay came and our friends in Shorewood came, but we started to dip in enrollment a little bit. But the third session was Making Community Your Equity Partner, where Dr. Giles really focused on some key readings from Dr. Gloria Lansing Billings. And then our final session, what have you learned this year that translates into change for next year? And that was really an open session to just talk about what are some things that you've tried and how did it go? And just kind of talk through some of those ideas or what are you thinking about for next year?
So can I ask, so who was included in the book sessions?
Yeah, so
Book study?
we put out invitations to anyone and everyone here at Shorewood. I will admit that, and this kind of leads into the next one, that Despite the Best Intentions is based off of a high school in a neighboring state, hypothetical neighboring state, which is right near a large college and along the lake. So as you read the book, it very much mimics Shorewood, but interestingly enough, the focus of the book is primarily secondary, So when we did roll out the Despite the Best Intentions, we wanted to be really open and honest about that so that we did have elementary teachers attend, but we also wanted them to realize that if they head into it, they may be reading a book about secondary schools. Not that there's not crossover, but we wanted to make sure that that was really, really clear as our elementary teachers attended.
So it was mostly high school teachers that came?
It ended up being a really good mix, no
Okay.
matter what. I think people took from it no matter which stage or level they were at, so it ended up being a pretty decent mix of teachers that showed up to the
And-
Despite the Best
And any
Intentions.
administrators or other staff that came?
Yeah, absolutely, yep.
And how
So,
many total?
What's that?
And how many?
Of our staff, so it was, again, it was a declining enrollment. We started with, oh boy, I have those numbers here because we actually signed in. I wanna say we started with 20 or 30 and ended around 15. And again, those last two sessions, I gotta be really honest, it was freakish. I mean, we had about 40 total in the auditorium, and we were expecting kind of a jam-packed auditorium.
Right, okay.
So it really just, and there was a lot of emails back and I had called Dr. Thompson in Whitefish Bay and said, should we just cancel this thing? And he and I both felt strongly. I also called the superintendent in MEC1. They all felt strongly that we needed to finish out, and that if we pushed it back any farther, it was gonna start to hit the end of the year, which is always really, really difficult for teachers to attend while a lot of the end of year activities are happening as well.
Okay. Was there any like online participation, or what kind of follow-up would there be for the participants, or maybe people couldn't make that in-person meeting? Was there an opportunity for them to do anything?
Yeah, so we talked about webinars in between, and it was a bit cost prohibitive. Dr. Giles is willing to offer those webinars in between, and I just couldn't get funding from the consortium to pay for that. They could really only pay for the 4 sessions.
Oh, okay. And then will it happen again next year? Or is
So
this
I am in charge of the book study again next year. Nobody took that on. That's going to be a summer project for me to kind of figure out where we're at. Right now I'm collecting suggestions from area districts as to what texts have been powerful for them, or what texts are they looking at. Just trying to do a collection right now of what do area schools and districts want to include. The really careful part here is, yes, it was super powerful for us and it was super important. It's also part of a consortium, so I want to make sure that there's voice from other districts as well as we continue to plan those. So realizing that much of Despite the Best Intentions was a secondary focus, one of the things that we planned to do then was to offer a bit more of an elementary focus by using our partner in Dr. Erin Winkler from UW-Milwaukee. And so before the school year started, we sat down with Dr. Winkler and asked if she would be willing to provide 4 sessions, primarily based on elementary school teachers, and not necessarily reading a specific text, but what are some various articles or chapters of books that she's found powerful as she's done her research. So her first 2 sessions focused heavily on Claude Steele's Whistling Vivaldi, which we have done, but she really kind of wanted to zone in on some of those pieces that we had been discussing. So her first session was entitled Racial Identity, Development, and How It Plays Out at Schools. And then the second one was Stereotype Threat and Possible Solutions. And these are really great opportunities that we provided at both Lake Bluff and Atwater, bounced back and forth, for teachers to get together and dialogue with Dr. Winkler. Very much informal is not the right way, but it was a good dialogue to just interact with Dr. Winkler in a way that oftentimes is a little bit more difficult at some of our larger professional development sessions. A little bit more intimate, a little bit more ability to just talk with Dr. Winkler. The third session, we actually did a walking tour of classrooms and buildings, as it was entitled Racial Instruction and Racial Cues. So we actually, the participants felt really strongly that they wanted to have Dr. Winkler walk through their classrooms or the hallways and identify what are some racial cues that we might not, like, that's a blind spot for us. We're not seeing what we're putting out within our classrooms and hallways, and just have her ask some questions. So it was a really interesting session where we were able to kind of walk through, and this one was at Lake Bluff, but walk through Lake Bluff and just have her identify here's some things that you might want to think about as you're posting work. What does that look like amongst the different children within your classroom? And then the last one she actually left open. She didn't have a title for it. She just kind of wanted to allow the participants to come and talk about what they wanted to talk about. And one of the participants brought a Paul Gorski article, Avoiding Racial Detours. So we just spent our time debriefing and talking about Paul Gorski's Avoiding Racial Detours article, and just kind of sharing that moment together in terms of what does that look like, asking questions. So that was kind of the elementary end of our book club discussions that we wanted to provide.
How many people would you say participated in those? Is that still within that kind of 40 to?
No, not as many as 40. Because there weren't secondary coming to these. These were pretty elementary focused. Again, we opened it up for all, but when we had them, so when we did the Closing the Achievement Gap, we were primarily in the auditorium. So it was really easy for everyone to come. When we did these, they were right after elementary school at Atwater and Lake Bluff, so they were pretty heavily elementary focused. So it was probably more in the range of 20 at every session. So then lastly, as I talked with Dr. Giles about our Above Despite the Best Intentions, one of the things that she actually offered in addition was something that she had been working with a few other area schools in the Madison area and northern Wisconsin, which was an action research opportunity for our teachers. And so we didn't have the funding through the consortium to do this, so Shorewood decided that it was worthwhile to run a pilot, if you will. And so what we did is we worked really closely with Dr. Giles to create kind of an action research experience that would be in lieu of our student learning outcomes that our teachers actually create as part of their educator evaluation system. So interestingly enough, Dr. Giles just switched jobs and is now working at DPI on SLOs.
Nice.
So hopefully there's like a trademark in there somewhere or a shout out. But really looked at kind of the SLO formation and what that looks like. So each month, 13 teachers who joined into the action research, and they paid a little bit extra and were able to get recognized for 3 credits through UW-Madison. And so they walked through kind of the action research pieces of focusing on equity, collecting and discussing data, modifying their actions, and coming to a conclusion. And so they spent 2.5 hours every month with each other and with Dr. Giles and Christina from, and I'm going to forget, I always mispronounce Christina's, Stefanik from UW-Madison, and really walk through kind of what does action research look like? What is data? What's good data? What is data like? How do you decipher that data? How do you make sure that what you're doing is working? And so they have gone through that process. We had our last meeting last week, and if you guys check your email, I also sent you an invite. The final presentation will be in Madison, unfortunately. I'm driving a van. So far I have 1 taker, so there's plenty of room if anyone would like to come in the van.
I'm planning on going.
Great.
So I'll be there.
Perfect.
I'll get
Wonderful.
myself
Are you going in the van?
I'm gonna make a, we're
Okay.
gonna, not going in the van, sorry.
That's fair. No one likes the van.
I heard about your driving.
Right, yeah.
Also fair. So they're going to be presenting their work from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at UW-Madison's Wisconsin Idea Room in the Education Building. And so we're pretty excited about that. Dr. Giles does try to bring in what she calls some quote-unquote heavy hitters to really see what some of areas, schools, and districts are really trying to do to show that public education is strong, public education is moving forward, and public education is really, really trying hard at what they do. And in our case, we did try to add in an equity focus. I just want to read off just a few of the questions that some of our teachers are looking at. And so one of our teachers, their question that they researched, will working movement and physical activity into my lessons increase engagement and motivation for my 4th grade special education math group students, right? And so where does equity reside in that? And really it's who's in that room, right? And so it's really important that within his 4th grade special education math group, he was noticing that the attention and the engagement wasn't there. And so he wanted to make sure that he took breaks and involved movement to keep students' engagement, and to see his final results and to see the emotion and engagement that he got out of his students is mind-blowing. And so it's simple questions that we can often ask ourselves that can make huge differences. How does student voice and choice impact motivation and connectedness in schools? Do strategies to develop metacognitive skills improve motivation and connectedness in schools? How can I, as an ELL educator, influence my international students' gender biases? Noticing that some of our international students came in with some pretty skewed gender biases, and how do we make sure that we address that as a teacher in a school? How can I increase motivation to read for intervention students? What factors impact motivation the most? What impact does feedback have on intervention students and their motivation to read? Can heterogeneous grouping, the expectation and environment of content-focused student discourse, and daily feedback from me in the form of exit tickets help improve student agency in their math learning? These are deep questions that our teachers really, really dug into, collected data, and some of that data looked different than what we would normally look at. So it was really, really a powerful activity for our students to go into. It's something that Dr. Giles and I will continue to talk about. How can we continue to provide and grow this type of program for our teachers? Because the feedback that we've gotten, and I have not done a formal survey yet for our teachers. I always like to kind of get to the end and then do that formal feedback. But informal feedback right now is that it was a powerful and advantageous activity for a lot of our teachers.
So your last comment about feedback, is that specifically about the action research, or is that about all 3 kind of equity activities that you're working on?
That last one was about just the action research, but we can probably do all of the above. That was, yeah, we can do all of the above within Shorewood. I'm not going to do it for the whole Closing
No.
Achievement Gap Consortium. Sorry, my mind switched. But yes, from
No.
within Shorewood, I can send out surveys on all of them.
Yeah, 'cause
easily enough.
one of the things that we heard at the staff linkage was that there isn't this, I guess, and you guys can correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but that there's not necessarily like this chance to kind of provide feedback on what's happening. I don't know if you would call this professional development. And also just thinking about, like, 1, I guess, how they do that, and 2, I think the other thing that kind of came out of not just the staff one, but some of the parents and the student ones as well, as, you know, it's one thing to do the academic, like, book study, and then it's another to do the practice of that or implementation of that in your classroom, and like who supports that piece. And so I don't know if you have any, you know, to help us kind of think through what that looks like.
Yeah, and so kind of a little bit of, so we always try to do surveys after our professional development times, and we'll add on this one as well. I think one of the key pieces that I wanted to do was provide somewhat of a balanced approach where kind of the book studies were more about the discourse, and then the action research was more about the action, because I want to provide time for people to just have conversations with their coworkers so that they can increase their ability to talk with each other and use each other as equity consultants and have those discussions. And then kind of the action research was more of the actionable steps. So what are you actually going to do? And so I tried to do a little bit of balance, but we can certainly try to figure out ways to make that happen. It's always just a little bit more difficult, and I'm being completely honest with you, when it's with the consortium, just because I'm balancing 2 needs, our own and then kind of the greater needs of some other, not the greater needs, but there's a lot of other pieces there that they're looking at. The other key piece for the book study is, I would say that falls as an action step underneath an SLO, so that's part of some learning and actionable steps. I don't know if I would say, like, because of the book study, you've increased, you know, or closed this achievement gap or paid off this educational debt. There's a whole nother actionable piece to that. So I would say the book study is a portion of it, it's not the whole.
And then how do they share with each other, like what their learnings are? Because it sounds like, so how many people are doing the action research?
13.
So let's say total of like 50 or 60 staff, right, participated in one of these three. So I think that was, again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things I heard was that there isn't this opportunity. It felt like we hear a lot of things here that didn't seem to be heard from across the staff about what they're doing and how they could share that, and this idea of being, they talked about themselves being experts in things that is not being utilized in the district. So I don't know, I guess just tell me a little bit about how these activities or learnings or PDs are shared across the district if not everybody's participating.
Yeah, that's a good question. So typically what I have been doing is sending out invitations quarterly for each one of these. In terms of we've not done recordings, which we certainly could. In terms of utilizing experts, I think one of the things that we've tried to do within our professional development is utilize a station work format, where when we started, we had some stations that we had teachers going through that were oftentimes led by either experts, other teachers, or some of the people that we have within our staff. But I think we could probably do a better job of continuing to utilize staff. I know I just sent out an email to our action research people to talk about how can we share with the board. And I think probably the next step of that will be, what does that look like with staff as well? Ultimately, and I think this kind of goes hand in hand with some of the work that we've been doing with UW-Milwaukee and design thinking, my real hope is that oftentimes the best way that I can get people involved is for staff to talk to staff and say, this is a really great opportunity, I think you should join next year. Because an email from Tim Joint doesn't always do it, but hopefully, if I can have our teachers talking to other teachers and saying, this was really, really powerful, do you want to do it with me next year? That's when we can start to grow exponentially fast. So it's my pyramid scheme of professional development.
Well, and I think that was what we heard, was that there needs to be more time for those kind of smaller group conversations and reflection. And that we do, just from all the meetings that you have presented, the work that's being done by teachers, and just these three examples and other examples over the last couple months, there's a lot of work that's being done that should be acknowledged and shared, and hopefully can help each other learn and do this stuff. And so I think perhaps we need to find more time for those conversations and less time for outside speakers, because I think that was something that also came up. So I hope as you look at professional development next year that some of those things can be done, because our teachers are doing incredible things, and it'd be a shame if it just doesn't go anywhere beyond them. That's great that they're doing it, and that's wonderful, but you're right, how can we not only get more teachers to do that stuff, but also share what they're doing?
So I think one of the things that we can take a look at based on feedback from what Tim had from these groups, also from what we've heard from the linkages is just be able to rethink our designs. So as we're looking at, we have 3 staggered full days for our racework professional development historically, and then we have at 3 of our buildings our early releases, once a week. So, usually from best practices from professional development, it's job embedded professional development around work that we're doing in our classrooms to be able to not only model examples, but also have some of that reflective time. And so I think thinking about the continual improvement cycle and rhythm of being able to have access to resources and then dedicated time for reflection on a lot of this work, I think we can dedicate some of that time using both not only our racework days, but also our Wednesday professional development times to be able to really kind of hone in on this work, really, right? So when it's grade levels or when it be departments, to kind of just, some of that is reflecting. So over the last 3 weeks since our professional development, like, what have you tried? How did that go? What are you nervous about? What do you want to talk about? To be able to I think, be more deliberate around that system of support. So that to me is something that we can take a look at.
Yeah, I think to me it makes sense that a conversation with a colleague is going to be more effective than you saying, hey, you're invited to this. But at the same token, maybe it's a push to the people who participated to say, hey, invite 3 colleagues to this and tell them about it, and, you know, here's an incentive to do that, or here's when you might do that, or something, to be a little more active in encouraging that. I mean, my thought as you were reviewing these is these seem like great opportunities to grow change leaders, and I don't wanna lose our, you know, the opportunity to activate those people. And if there's sort of no continuing discussion or no next step, no request to, you know, or no feedback loop to ask them, okay, how has your teaching practice evolved as a result of this book you read, this training you did? I mean, it sounds like in the last example there's, you know, really clear, but you know, the book study less so, like, and I think, you know, how I always feel after a book is, wow, I have all these great ideas, but if nobody's holding me accountable, then I'm not gonna do those things. I mean, the same with like attending a conference, like you get all worked up and you have great intentions, but if nobody's saying, hey, that thing you learned,
Despite those best intentions.
despite those best intentions, what happened, and then what do you, you know, the really important thing is, what do you need from this administration to make the changes that you're excited about now that you have all these great ideas? And overall, I mean, I think, not to diminish these, but what I sort of heard from the teachers was that there are so many, I mean, it really felt universal, good intentions and interest in doing work around equity, but they felt like there wasn't a universally available system of support, like for changing teaching practice and doing deep dives into curriculum. And so I'm hoping, it sounds like that's gonna be part of what the equity director is gonna work on, so I'm looking forward to kind of hearing then, you know, beyond growing ambassadors and leaders, then what do we make globally available, and how do we then integrate that into the everyday rather than it being like a 3 times a year PD. And
So the one that, and this is a very small piece of some really great comments, the one thing that was an aha moment for me is that these book study sessions, there were 4 of them, and we spread them out over the year. That was a terrible idea, because there's too much time in between. And so our goal was to make sure that we were talking about it throughout the whole year and to make it at least manageable. People get busy, it's difficult to, so the goal was to take small chunks. The problem was it was almost too much time in between. And so one of the things that we talked about is maybe participation stays high if we have them in subsequent months, or 2 times a month in 2 months, that sort of a style, rather than spread out over the whole year, because you lost steam and attention span as we went on. So both of those were spread out over the whole year, and again, despite that best intention, which we thought, great, now we'll have conversations the whole year long, it kind of became, I forgot to read chapter 4 in the past 3 months, or I read chapter 4 3 months ago and I don't really remember what was in chapter 4.
And again, I think using the books to be a catalyst for what's going on in the classroom, and then having those follow-up discussions about like what I tried in the classroom and what support I need, or how I can better tweak that. Like, that's to me where the real important work is. Again, where the books are really just a catalyst and research support. But and again, that's what I'm hearing as part of the feedback from the linkages is like, when do we have time to talk about like what I did yesterday? Because I'm, either excited about it and I want to share, or I'm nervous about it and I need to talk. And that space is a space of growth for us that we really need to, I think, hardwire in as we're moving forward.
well, it sounded like too that even with a sense of what they needed to do, what I heard at least a few teachers say is then they didn't feel like they either had the time or the tools to like actually do that work, and and they weren't being asked, what do you need? It was like, okay, go, and that's so that felt like a source of frustration.
Yeah, and I think that's the collective conversations between Tim, equity director, and the principals, that are in the buildings. And again, that's the capacity building piece that we really need to work on, have an opportunity to make some strides on next year.
Well, and I feel like, you know, as a board member, like I wanna know what the board can do in terms of like setting policy or directing resources or approving directing resources, like, but we aren't, I don't know, I don't know where to
Well, I think
direct the attention at this point.
we're also
like,
though in like this
is
moment,
it-
I mean, like where there's a lot of, I mean, we're bringing on a new HR and business person, we're bringing on a new equity director, we have a lot of other new staff, right? And so I think I think we have to kind of like have that person come on, these two
Right.
people come on, and Julie. I mean, really, we're gonna have 3 new people as administrators very shortly. And so I think that's something that I think we need to like take into account before we
Oh,
make,
for sure.
you know, so.
Yeah, I meant, like, I guess what I was trying to say is when, after that equity director starts and puts together a plan, like, I'm really looking forward to hearing, like, some kind of ask to us, you know, and, or the administrators to say, here's where you need to put resources, or here's how you need to reorganize, or whatever, so.
So I think one of the most important things is just continuing to maintain a focus on equity from a policy standpoint and being insistent on that. Like that to me is where, from a board standpoint, that you can have this continual impact, even though it might not feel like you're doing much, you know, individually as far as actions, like the insistence on that and the continuation of that is because that sets the targets for us to be able to look at resources and be able to set that accordingly, so.
Okay, anything else? No? Thanks, Tim.
Yep, thank you.
And then our other kind of standing agenda item is the referendum. So first in operations.
Yes, so just to let you know, so I met with representatives from EUA and Myron, and then staff members from Atwater, Lake Bluff, and SIS just to go through some initial drafts of some design work that we're looking at, especially in the heavy renovation areas of each one of those buildings. So the idea is to be able to involve people who are in those physical spaces on a regular basis and just pick their brains as far as what they're looking at and what they think would be good solutions and practices, and then having our architects and construction people be present for those conversations. And so, again, most of our focus at the elementary school is around just, in SIS, just some initial solutions for the office areas. So involving support staff, principals, student services people. In some cases, there's classrooms that are being flipped, so being able to touch base with some people on that. So that's most of what our conversations were. This is an initial conversation, and so that's going to allow the architects and construction managers to go back, especially architects at this point in the design phase over the next couple months, to put together some preliminary designs, and then we'll work through a process when we get back on the other side of summer to confirm some of those designs as we're moving forward. So essentially that's part of the work that I did this week. On this Friday, we have time with the high school staff that's affected, along with the district office staff in those heavily renovated areas in this building, to be able to go through the same process. Then also met with the district management team on Tuesdays, so those minutes were attached. Again, most of that was a review of the user group meetings that we had. There was a question that came up in that group just around the owner's representative and where the board was at with that. So that should be a conversation that we should probably have again. I think part of what we were waiting for would be, to look at what is the skill set and experience of our new business manager coming in. And so with Marta's approval tonight, then we'd have an idea of that. So if that's something that we'd want to engage her in as part of that conversation, I'm sure we can schedule that as we're moving forward. But I think from a architect and construction standpoint, to be able to know if you're going to get an owner's representative, to be able to bring them on as early in this process as possible would be helpful, just so they understand kind of where we're going with that. So that would be something I would ask the board to just consider at some point, and let me know if you want Marta to be part of that conversation. I'm sure she'd be available before July 1st if we wanted her to be.
At least by phone.
At least by phone, right. And so, yeah, so we'll go from there. So.
Can I ask about the addition of Mickey on this design team? Because he has not, to my knowledge, been involved in any of the referendum or facility work.
Around the technology pieces.
Just the technology
Yeah,
pieces.
and the
so that's
wiring
what
and kind of
the-
that, yeah, that's,
He has come to,
kind of
he
the-
was coming to many of the meetings earlier on.
yeah, so,
Well, some of them, yeah.
so looking
he's
at.
just looking at the technology.
Yeah, and
side
the
of things?
infrastructure pieces, so as we're looking at classrooms and looking at offices and that type of thing, like what is a lot of that infrastructure, you know, what are the needs in those spaces? So that's an update from my end as far as how things are going. So again, we'll meet with the high school staff this Friday, and then go from there.
Okay. I have on my to-do list to plan a meeting with, around facilities and the OR. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Board superintendent action, we have approval of open enrollment, so,
Can I make a motion that we take a 3-minute
oh, sure,
recess?
yes.
It's 9:45, we've been here since 6, so,
Second.
yeah, awesome. Just 3 minutes.
We're in 3-minute break. I could stand.
Made a motion.
Oh my gosh. Oh, okay.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Keep getting the text. Can we stay up? Can we stay up? No. Does Julie start July 1st too?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And then the goal is to get the equity person starting July 1st.
Yeah,
I mean, ish.
as soon as.
And then, Shada, when's your official, are you here for, in August or no?
I think the last date we put on the letter is 23rd of August.
Oh, you, okay. When is that search gonna start?
So the next posting would be for Crystal and Jackie's, and then after that is Smithy's end, so we'll do that in June. And go from there, so. Yeah, Julie, they've got a condo, they bought a condo in town, so they're
Cool.
moved.
Oh yeah, did Marta have any luck finding a place?
She didn't on Friday, I'm not sure what Saturday brought, so it's pretty slim.
Is it
and
Marta
short.
or Marta?
I think it's Marta,
I mean, that's how I, Sound of Music, but,
yeah. I think that's
and then, how do you say her last name?
Kwiatkowski.
Quiet. Quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, I can do that. Mrs. K?
Yeah. Coach K. Ms. K. Yes, so, yeah, the kids had a great, I mean, they really enjoyed the tours. The tours were great.
I mean, I guess it was funny afterwards, we all were like, oh, they might not live in Shorewood. I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, we all were like, oh, you'll go to this school, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, wait, but they could move anywhere.
Yeah, they're kind of moving like
Wherever, I mean, wherever they can
village
find
by
something.
village between here and
Sure.
Menominee Falls.
Whoa, wow, yes. And that
I
one,
mean,
yes.
hopefully they don't have to go that far.
That one I'm connected, but yeah.
But yeah, wherever they can find
Yeah.
something.
Perfect.
And they want to move it pretty quick and get the kids down here. Connor's in swimming, so he'll be starting, well, they wanted to do some summer swim up here, or down here if they could. So if anybody knows, anybody looking for a lake house in Tomahawk, then
Nope.
I don't even know where that is. I'm gonna look it up. Wait one second.
Where are those minutes posted you were talking about for the
facility stuff?
It's called,
If I go to facilities on the homepage.
no, it's on the board books.
Oh.
Okay, we're gonna get started. All right, so up next is action agenda, so I will take a motion to approve open enrollment.
I
So-
move that we approve the open enrollment.
Second?
Okay, so, go ahead, Tim.
So what we're bringing forth today is the addition of 3 open enrollment seats at 12th grade. So we do our initial open enrollment seat projections in January, and that's where we open up seats at 1st and 2nd grade. And we try to do those pretty conservatively because we don't have a really good idea. We have a good idea of what our enrollment looks like, but you never know what happens with moves between January and August. One of the interesting pieces is oftentimes, and in most districts I've been in, you don't open up a whole lot of 12th grade open enrollment seats. In this case, we're opening up 3. We have 3 students and families that moved out of the district before what is called the senior rule was able to apply. So a senior rule is a family that lives in a district that has a senior standing can then stay in that district. And so families that move out after their junior year can stay in that district for their 12th grade year. In this case, we had 3 families move out before their students had met the deadline of that senior rule. So they would actually be exiting out of our system and have to move into a different district. We just feel like we've had these students for a good long time, and as you guys have noticed, wellness is a key piece of what we try to do. So keeping our kids as much as we can, we think it's important. So we're opening 3 seats. Those would be preferential seating because they've already been in the district for those students. This does not mean that's the end of our open enrollment. That means that we're still gonna wait until registration day to relook at our numbers and look at potential other seats that we'd open up.
So this is in addition to what we've already approved for next year.
Correct.
And specific to those seniors.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, what's the date for like officially qualifying?
It's, I wanna say February 2nd of their junior year. I don't know the exact date. It's a random date. Right, so at
So
some
this
point.
is like a
we have-
state rule,
This is a state rule. This is a
or state law?
DPI state rule.
Okay, so this is
correct.
not a Shorewood district
This
like
is not a
decision
Shorewood
about,
district
okay,
policy that we could move. This is a state statute.
So
Okay.
family move before
February.
the deadline.
Before that deadline, if they move
they had
before that,
moved
they
after.
do not qualify for the senior rule.
If they moved at just a couple days after,
Then they qualify.
then
And they
even though
would
it's
be
in
here.
February.
Correct.
And is that just for the senior?
That is just for a junior standing going to a
So
senior
if they
year.
have a younger sibling who's a sophomore, they would then go to matriculate in the new district.
Correct. So
Okay.
that's the hard one is, so if you had a senior and a sophomore, excuse me, a junior and a freshman, after their junior year, that senior would be able to stay. The freshman would actually have to move to a different district, unless there are open enrollment seats opened.
And
It's
then
bizarre.
they don't have to pay tuition because we're opening this up as an OE seat, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay, and then we're legally, we can do it, we can give preference to kids who are already in the district.
We automatically have we're not giving them preferential seating. That's built into the open enrollment. So having siblings and prior residents, prior enrollment automatically gives you a preferential spot on the open enrollment list.
Under state law, or?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
So do you have an idea of the new seats we're opening up for the younger ages, are those preferential? Is there a mix?
The ones that we approved in January,
Yeah.
some of them will be preferential and some of them will be not it'll go into the random drawing that we already have posted. So they've already, all parents who applied for open enrollment already have their wait list.
So since there's a way for us to kind of pick and choose, if you will, by keeping families of, students within the family together in the same district, Are there other caveats? Are there other things that we could do to, let's say, kind of counteract the effects of Chapter 220 and diversify? I know I've asked this before, but I didn't realize that there was this caveat here.
Right.
Are there other ways where we can say we are looking for X, Y, or Z?
Not to my specific knowledge. So what we did last year as a district is we opened up open enrollment seats for preferential seating only. And so if you look at last August, you'll notice that we brought in some students in 1st through 6th grade. That was allowing in preferential seating. Pablo, to your question, I don't know. I don't know, nor do I think.
I suspect the answer is no.
I
No.
Yeah, I don't
suspect the
think
answer
so
is no
either.
as well. And I know Dr. Davis has talked with some of our representatives about that as well.
Yes, in the Capitol and to officials of the DPI, and they both said no. To your question.
Yeah,
kind of what
Okay, any other questions or discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Okay, now we have a superintendent's consent agenda. I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the superintendent's consent agenda.
Second?
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Best of luck to Jackie and Crystal. And welcome to the other many new faces, including Marta Kwiatkowski. I'm going to work on saying her last name, I think, a lot. Excited to have everybody on board. All right, just an hour late. Public comments number 2. Okay. So board governance. So what I wanted to say around facilities is that I just want to talk about this upcoming design workshop. So it's set for June 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to have, one of the things that we talked about at the meeting was to have like this kind of standard email that all of us could send out. I do still think that we should, in the past, we could do this again. We've kind of created a Google Doc where people can say like who they're specifically reaching out to. I will reach out to everybody on, that came for the FACT meetings that happened for the referendum, but if there's other people you know of, I know Pablo, you already sent something. So I'll send you guys kind of the link to this kind of standard email that we have that you can personalize. One of the things that we decided at our meeting was to have an RSVP, just to help with planning. So there would be like an RSVP link as well for people to fill out. And then the other ways that this is gonna be advertised is through village manager's memo, IC, and kind of like, you know, things around that people would see, like postings we might put out, and Facebook and social media. So, did I miss anything that you can think of? So do you guys have any questions about it? I think it's gonna be, so Hillary and I were sat in on the meeting kind of talking through what they're gonna do. So it's really gonna provide a lot of opportunities for people to talk about their goals and values that they wanna see and like how they want the building to feel in some ways. And then there's, he showed us probably, I don't know, 20 different like ways to think about it in terms of other architecture, which I think again will help people kind of think through like, all right, so what do we want it to look like? Hillary made the good point of talking about how we could also show kind of how the additions in Shorewood have looked, right, over time, and how they fit within this continuum of being very strict to original and kind of thinking about it. If there was a word for like the opposite. Contrast, yeah. So I think it'll be really interesting, and it's an opportunity for us as well as board members to have a kind of say in that planning. So it'll be good for us to be there. So that's what I wanted to say about facilities. Okay. Lance, do you want to talk about seed update?
Sure. I was going to tell you about the 13 new seed classroom grants that were funded for $90,000, but Sarah, I'm glad she got to talk about that. In addition to that, there were four grant reports presented at the meeting on work that was done with grants that were made last year. That included Colleen Tierney talking about a set of new Chromebooks that were bought for the literature and speech classes that take place in the Performing Arts Building, so those students don't have to come over here to use Chromebooks, basically, and that allowed them to add 2 units to the class, which is way more efficient. Another one was by a number of teachers. I thought this was really interesting, talking about using the bulletin boards in the hallways as the documentation panels where students get to put up their learning process, basically. So the students are learning how to document the actual learning process that they're going through. So that was, some of these are pretty small grants, but, have a big impact on students. Amelia Hernandez talked about some new equipment in the graphics art lab, including a vinyl cutter and an embroidery machine that's connected to computers. So that opens up a whole bunch of creative possibilities for students to create work that's tangible and that they can give and kind of spread around with their art classes. And Mike Halloran and Amelia talked about some equipment for the visual journalism class that they're using the students are using with a lot of enthusiasm. And the only other 2 things are Music and More event is this Saturday at 7 p.m., June 1st. All this information's on the Shorewood Seed website. Details are there. And also the brunch run after a little bit of some hiccups about location and all that is happening on September 15th. Both of those are fundraisers for Seed. That's 2 big ways that they get money to give back to the school district. And there's no July meeting.
I have a question about the seed grants. I assume, is there some kind of feedback process to make sure that if seed is funding like Chromebooks or something, that is then not in conflict with the broader technology plan or other,
I don't know.
Yeah, so part of the process, part of the things that we built into the grant process would be some communication from the teachers submitting the grants to the administrators, and making sure, again, like from a technology standpoint, that it fits within the tech plan or it's allocated for the tech plan, so we don't have duplications there.
Okay.
So yeah, that communication's been built in. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. So we also have then for the board, equity kind of updates, and I'll share 3 things. I don't know if other people have others, but there's been kind of 3 opportunities for the board to attend trainings. So the first is on June 20th, out of the Regional Educational Lab, and I guess it's in Pewaukee. So school boards and educational equity, bridging research, policy, and practice. That's happening, I guess, in a partnership with DPI and CISA that I think superintendents or other administrators are also invited to. WASB's having another equity symposium in, is it Appleton?
July 12th and 13th.
Yeah, in Lawrence.
Paper Valley Hotel.
Okay, thanks. July 12th and 13th. And then just a couple minutes actually before our board meeting, we got an email from Nicole Brookshire, inviting us to a equity-based kind of it's actually kind of a 3-4 month program that's called, I already forgot the name, sorry.
Didn't she say there's just 1 seat?
No, there's 4 seats, I thought. Did she say 1 seat?
Oh.
I think it was 1.
There's
I saw
one.
one.
She did, yeah, there's
Oh.
4 remaining sessions with GARE.
And there's 1 seat available. Oh, so we guess we'd have to decide. Government Alliance on Race and Equity. So, and we should talk about that. There's 3 additional dates in July, August, and October. So whoever did it would need to be able to attend all of those. But I think these are all kind of other opportunities that we've had, and I appreciate her reaching out to us and offering this to us, where we can, I think, again, thinking about what you just talked about, Emily, just like the board's role in the equity work, thinking about kind of, and using the resources that we have here in Wisconsin to kind of both partner with other school board members and have those conversations, and then also attend some of these trainings. So I guess, yeah, we should decide if one of us can go.
Is it definitely for board members, or would that be something the superintendent should go to? 'Cause I'm trying to reread her email.
Yeah,
to tell.
I'll have to reread it. And when I met with her earlier in the year, she had talked about some of the opportunities, because I believe that's a national network that we can get involved in. It's includes municipalities, from what I remember. So I can take a look at the email and see.
Yeah, and her office is the one that's partnering with the YWCA to offer all county employees their
Unlearning Racism.
I guess shorter curriculum that they've
Yeah.
created. So, but
Yeah, and Nicole and her office are also just really interested in kind of helping them support not only Shorewood, but kind of school districts in Milwaukee County, like around some of this work. So, so I think she can be a really good creative partner in providing some resources as we're moving forward.
Maybe we could ask her for, she didn't say the specific dates, and for me, that would make the difference. Like, I would be willing to do it, but I don't know if, part of July and August, there's dates when I'm out of town, so I don't wanna commit to it without knowing the dates, but I will say, I've looked at that Garrett site, and it's really awesome. Cause one thing I liked about it is that it talks about how communities as a whole can kind of come together, so it, to me, it gave me some ideas of, there's like, basically manuals for doing this work. It's pretty amazing, so, trying to remember the community in Virginia. Brian, do you remember, it's not Arlington, it's.
Fairfax?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
Fairfax.
got like a, sort of collaborative going around racial equity that involves their
Yeah.
municipal government and their school district. It's pretty awesome, so.
Yeah, and I think that's really what this organization is meant to do, is to be able to provide that more comprehensive conversation.
So, all right, well, I'll put that on my list of things to figure out, and then we can see if somebody can go. She also seemed like she'd be willing to, like, just talk to us, so we could also maybe just schedule that to happen.
Well, maybe it would be, the other thing I was gonna bring up is like, if, some or all of us are going to these late June and mid-July events, taking a page from what I was saying about the teachers, like, we should then debrief and make sure we're all sharing what we learn, if not all of us are at those and even if we are all at them, then translating what we are thinking about into action and policy changes, and then debrief so that we don't lose that, good ideas that come out.
Okay. And then HRC?
HRC in May just had a meeting with subcommittees doing their separate work, and then in June will be the next business meeting. So there's really no report from that.
So one of the things that came up, like last time when Emily was talking about Shorewood moving forward and you were talking about HRC, was that there seems to be, like, is there somebody who is trying to organize all the things that are happening around similar things? Because I feel like both of those groups I feel like are talking about police, right?
Right. Well,
They're working together.
they are working.
Yeah.
Shorewood moving forward was at the previous HRC meeting to
Oh,
talk
okay.
about what they were doing. So they're dialoguing at least about what they're all working on.
Okay. And so do you feel like having one board, like us being there as like liaisons, also then connects them to like what's happening here? That makes sense, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure because sometimes I feel like there's like, well, I don't actually know sometimes what's happening, like action steps that are happening with those groups, so.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I don't know, the leadership, I think on both sides have been good about like, oh, let's not duplicate efforts, but let's join efforts, and there are like slightly different goals, I feel like, so.
Okay. And then I just wanted to, so we've had, not counting tonight, already 4 linkages, and so just kind of to make sure and kind of follow up, there's certain things that definitely, I think we can talk about tonight's linkage. Well, we can talk about it tonight, I guess, it's probably fine, since I didn't specify which ones. To make sure that there's things if we wanted to follow up with Brian on. So, so the first one we had was at the town hall on the 14th, and I know we all got kind of follow-ups emails about the table tennis club. So you were following up on that?
Yeah, I have a meeting tomorrow with Mike, joint along with the table tennis representatives.
Okay. And then I think, I think one of the things that I would say, there were some themes that came out of all of them, and one of them was just thinking about district communication. And just, even today, talking about what's going on with MAC and so one of the things that came up today was the MAC and single age communication, about like what's the same, what's the difference. The document that Tim created for us as a board isn't anywhere on the website, apparently. So, it's like thinking about, and we've talked about the website in terms of what's happening with the referendum. I mean, so I'm gonna be honest, I don't actually use the website for anything, so I don't necessarily go there for many, like, like things to like check about these, but I am wondering if, I know we see that as our main source of, or one of the ways in which we're kind of driving people to the website for communication. And just to be, I think, make sure we're really clear about what's, like, the different things that are happening and making it easy to find them. So, and I don't know, I mean, I guess this is a question for you about, like how does that, who goes back and looks at, right, or like tests, like, what's going on with the website, how updated it is.
So Ted and Caitlin, Caitlin specifically kind of owns that, but that would be a conversation I can have with them, and how we're looking at metrics about visits, and is that the type of thing that you're?
Well, I mean, I just think, the conversation that came, and again, you guys jump in, that came out of that town hall was specifically, I think, talking about this feeling like that there's like disorganized communication coming from us. And it's the word I wrote. And I think some of it is, but I guess what I'm saying is like there's a general theme about like the organization around the communication, and I'm just using the website as one piece of that.
Sure.
I think is not necessarily user friendly. And I don't know like who kind of goes back and like says like, hey, is it easy to find X, Y, and Z? But just being, I think, given kind of, I think one of the things that, that comes up in the linkages is that there's questions about things that people, I assume, have like tried to find the answers to before coming here sometimes. Like the MAC and single age, like what's the difference? Why do we do it? I assume she looked, and none of us could find it, so when we looked.
Sure.
Well, and drill that down even more, that there's not really anything on the Lake Bluff page that says we have MAC and single age. There's nothing on the Atwater page that says we have MAC and single age, and this is how it's formatted, this is how it's formatted, and the argument from the parent is that that could be a draw to know that it's not just one system, but there's nowhere on any of our, how would you know that?
Sure.
For that specific issue.
Yeah. Or even, I was thinking, one of the things that came up with the parent linkage was the question of like, what happens when a student uses like hate language in a classroom? We actually do have a policy around that, but you actually can't find the code of conduct. I actually went to look. You actually can't just Google code of conduct in our thing and pull it up.
Sure. Okay.
Right.
So then you don't really know, like, well, what was supposed to happen in that case?
Yeah.
I think I can't remember, I think in multiple linkages, multiple stakeholders, I got the sense that there wasn't a sense, like, it's not clear what the threshold is for like putting out a communication, like there's an email from Dr. Davis that there's a snow day, clearly, but then what are the other times, so that came out in regards to the SIS staff situation, why was there a statement, and then Mockingbird too, like what's going on with these multiple statements. So one thing maybe going forward would be to have a standard for like, okay, these are the cases, like if there is a situation where students are unsafe, that is when we put out a when there is a statement and who signs it. Like if there's I don't know if there already is something written that says that, but so that it's not so much a judgment call and it doesn't seem arbitrary to people. Like, we can point to that and say, look, anytime there's a student who, is in an unsafe, or there's a safety threat to students, we're gonna put out an email, we're gonna put out a text blast, we're gonna do this. so that we know what to expect and we know who's gonna be putting it out and how quickly, you know. 'Cause I think another thing we heard was like, why not wait a day and think about it? Or, you know, it seems like things are fast and disorganized.
Yeah, and I mean, some of that is like the news cycle too, right? So
Sure.
some of that threshold is, if there's gonna be communication about it,
Right.
you know, in the news, then certainly that's something that we need to be able to
But
put
if that,
a-
so, and then that's something you ran in policies, like if there's anticipated media coverage, we're gonna try to get ahead of it.
Yeah, I can go back and look and see what we have in writing and then be able to talk with, again, Caitlin and Ted on that.
And then I did wanna, I mean, you didn't say anything when we were having this conversation with in the parent linkage, but, I mean, there is language in the code of conduct, around the use of, like, hate language and, racist language, sexist language.
Right, and kind of a
Right.
protocol, right.
And there is a
Of
protocol
what's-
for that,
right, of
right?
what's done.
So, I mean, because they were talking about, like, having a no tolerance rule around, you know, the use of those words. But that is, I mean, I guess, and later I thought, like, but that is, I think, captured in the code of conduct, because it's how the word is used. Right, so it's one thing, we were talking about this, right? It's one thing to read it in a book, but it's another thing to be said to somebody,
Correct.
right? And
Right.
that's the part that is covered in the code of conduct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I think the other thing that I remember from that linkage is the, kind of the getting to a response to address like hate language, for example, that may not be, like a restorative circle might not be an appropriate way to be able to, like, address that at the time, and to be able to have, some protocols, again, that would be in place. So that's a conversation, especially like with the deans, you know, I think it falls back on, as part of that practice, and to have some more consistency, and I think responses around, and some training around that, and what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think, I don't know who else was on the board when we kind of did the review of the code of conduct. You know, I think it's important to have discretion in the code of conduct.
Right.
Because not every case is there's very few cases that are an obvious, like, this is what the consequence should be, without
Sure.
knowing anything else about the student and the situation. But, it did feel to me from that conversation that there wasn't and we've heard this before, that there isn't, like, consistency, and how it's being practiced, or that people understand, like, this is what's gonna happen. What I thought was interesting about the restorative circle comment was that the parents at that meeting were saying, like, we don't think it's a good place to use that, and then later staff at another meeting were, like, saying, we do think it's a good thing to use. And so, I mean, I think my other kind of takeaway from all the linkages was that there needs to be greater conversations where everybody's talking to each other.
Together,
Well, and
Because-
perhaps that's the conversation that it might not be beneficial in elementary school. Second graders, probably a restorative circle might not benefit that situation. High school, it probably might. So I think we need to be clear as to it's being used, people understand how to use it,
Mhm.
and that it's used age appropriately, and all these things. But I think that was part of the frustration at the teachers, was that we don't really know that have the right tools to do
Right,
that.
yeah, and,
So-
right, again, with that training, and then the communication of that training, and the communication of here's what our protocols are, and to be able to find it on the website as things would come up. I think those are all things kind of communication related.
Yeah.
To be able to look at.
I mean, I guess the last thing, you know, I think there was a lot of kind of, we spoke to you, about some of the other specific concerns we had with the, staff linkage that were specifically around personnel issues already. But I do think, and I guess this is kind of maybe a question to the board, is that I think, there seems to be, an opportunity for us to maybe say something, either write something or say something somewhere where we talk about the fact that the board is we remain committed to doing the equity work. It's important to us, it's important to the work we do. and it's not gonna always be like easy, and that we've actually done some really hard work over the last 3 years, and some of that has meant that, and some of that means that we're in these kind of places and spaces, right, where things don't feel great. And that despite the challenges that over the last 3 years, I think we've actually made some important strides, that sometimes get lost, I think, in kind of the other work and some of the other things that are happening. Because I do feel like there's this sense that, well, I heard both that there was worry that we were gonna not do the equity work and not kind of continue, and then also feeling like the equity work is getting in the way. And I don't even know what that means.
Or it's like blinding, you know, it's just created a
Yeah.
too singular a focus rather than like integrative into everything, that it was just like, we gotta do this stuff.
Yeah.
I guess I'd push back on that. Nothing wrong with saying that we remain committed, and that's true. But I also don't wanna lose sight of the other concerns. Like I heard from teachers that sounded like a clear majority of them are just as committed, but they were saying they don't have what they need to do that work yet. And so they were raising other concerns. And I feel like putting out a statement like that might give give them the sense that we didn't hear what they were saying about that other stuff. That we just heard they don't wanna do the equity work, which wasn't what I heard at all. And then for the broader community, putting out a statement like that might be perceived as saying something about our personnel situation, and I don't wanna give that impression either, that's like our response to community concern about one teacher. So.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I would just add to that, no, I would agree with both those things. I think the thing that, I think we have to think about is like, so if we need to put I think what I heard was that from the teachers is that they want support on doing the work, but I'm not saying that they don't wanna do the work,
Yeah.
right? But, and maybe you're right, maybe it's too singular a focus would be a better way to put it, but, that we need to find ways, as a board, that if we're committed to doing that, like as you said, then that means we're committed to finding the resources and making sure that there's support for doing that as well. But I do feel like one of the things that struck me, and I said this to you guys, already, was that there was like these similar conversations happening where it feels like the students and parents aren't talking to the teachers, and there's this like question of like what's happening, and then teachers and administrators aren't talking. And so it's like, or they're not seeing things the same way, or not having the same perspective from both those groups. And then I think it was the students who were like, we need to talk to each other if we actually want to see some change happen. And I feel like, yeah, because, telling us is still the same kind of like, okay, so, right, like, we still hear different stories from we hear different perspectives, definitely, and different feelings about how those things make people feel. And so to make change, I think those conversations have to happen.
Well, and I do think within those, 2 weeks, right, we heard from the parents at that linkage, we heard from teachers, we heard from students. And we heard from those 3 groups. And as you said, they weren't all not talking to each other. But we, in terms of leading the district and being really the conduit of all 3 of those groups, because that's this role, to put something out, because I do want to zoom up to 30,000 feet. We have accomplished quite a lot this year, and I don't want to ignore that. I'm not saying that we don't have challenges, and that particularly this equity work right now and everything else that the district is going through is difficult stuff, but I think we still need to give credit to the everyday and the work that has been done this year, because it's been quite an exceptional year. So depending on what's in that content, right? It's all in how it's said, but I do think there is, and particularly in this work, it feels very much like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I do think that that it would be advantageous to kind of loop this year into an ending of sorts.
Yeah,
because I think we all need it.
And that's part of what, when I talked before around kind of doing the definition work with staff, I know there was staff that was interested in doing some of that joint work, some staff that had opted in to helping out with the definition, to be able to do some outreach to maybe parents or do some outreach to students to be able to like sit down and have those conversations, and that group of 20, if you will, might be a good size to start with, and that would be, you know, that would allow us to begin to facilitate some smaller group conversations that can start to maybe cross some of those sections.
Yeah, but in terms of communication, I feel like this is, yes, equity has been a focus and will continue to be a focus, and it should be integrated, it should be something that we all do. And we've done a lot of other stuff. So to balance that message that, like, yes, it's important and it's become through which we see everything. Maybe
Sure.
it is through which we should see everything, but it's also how many other words, you know, if we were to do a word doodle or whatever that thing is called with the words that were said tonight, what's the word that was said the most? Equity.
Right.
So, okay, let's own that, that's important work, but you know, like, there's other things that are happening every day, and I wanna give credit to all the other things as well.
So are you
If
thinking?
that makes sense. I'm not getting from the board's communication, yes, equity is important, so is the fact that we passed this huge referendum, has nothing to do with equity, has nothing to do with, you know, anything. I'm just thinking, when we look at this year in total, I think our equity work has been central, and there's more than just the equity work that we have accomplished. And I don't think that was very clear in how I just articulated that, but it's 10:30 and we're just, you know.
That's fair. So I think,
we do need
I
to
mean, I
look
just
at-
think that, because one of the things that I felt, and I don't know what our role is versus what Brian's role is, but I really do feel like, you know, that the conversations that need to happen, when we can be in that room too, but, I mean, as, I think it was one of the students who were like, we can't be playing telephone.
No.
Right, like where we
Right.
get information and we're trying to like figure out like, because we actually do get very different perspectives on like the same thing from different groups, and they need to be talking to each other about those different perspectives, right? So I'm again struck by like, I think just the need for those kinds of, what I would say, restorative, reflective conversations that need to happen as a result of, I think, a really, really difficult year.
But I also heard from the students the strong desire that it be students and teachers having those conversations, not community members necessarily. You wanna weigh in on that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to unpack, those three, and I'd be reiterating, and it is 10:30, it's gonna be reiterating, so I'll try to add some new thoughts, and one of my thoughts that I think hits on another theme that was frustrating in all those sessions was hearing things that we knew were maybe not true, and knowing where our space was, where we could push back and clarify. Instead, we just gave folks a space to share, and that was good. My only concern long-term is that, you know, that just, you know, there's misinformation out there, or misunderstandings of how receptive we were or weren't, and that's one thing. One of the things that I wanted to clarify was that there seems to be this impression, at least among some, that when we focus on equity, we're not focused on teaching and learning. And it wasn't, we need to get back to the basics. And I would argue and push back, and I think we all would, that equity work is good work and it benefits everyone, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. But it really does, when we hit on, back to what Tim shared, he was talking about Flory Latson Billings' work on culturally relevant pedagogy. That's just good teaching. That's just good teaching. So I want to get that, and I didn't push back in the teacher meeting, but that narrative was kind of, I heard it, maybe I was wrong, maybe I misinterpreted that.
I heard that.
I don't want to,
Yeah.
equity's important, but let's do teaching and learning. It's like, wait. It's the same.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that was I mean, that was a sentiment I felt, and that was something that hearing, you know, now I think we just need to articulate. The other thing, just to wrap up, I mean, the big concern we heard from teachers was there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, but there's also concern about not having enough time to put into practice what they're learning. It's that difficult bridge from theory to practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the toughest thing. That's where we're gonna see the change. And in processing this and talking to Brian and others, it's like, well, we need to go through a certain amount of time to like learn this stuff before we can just turn around and start implementing, right, some practices. So my hope, and I think you've articulated this at least to me or to a couple of us, and the linkage was that, you know, there will hopefully be more time for teachers to have time to develop curriculum with some support with each other as leaders. But I really want to get away from this idea that equity work is not teaching and learning, because it is. And I don't think we share that.
And I think that goes hand in hand with getting from a lecture kind of a format to a workshop kind of a format in terms of the PD, because that was another, you know, sort of request that I think the folks that are at a place of understanding that this is about integration and not an additive thing, like they're ready to go, and they would be the leaders that would, you know, pull everybody with them, but they need some different tools and direction and time to do that.
Yeah,
So.
I think that goes hand in hand with our conversation before about how do we go beyond our race work days, which are important, but to
Right.
make sure that's integrated into our early releases and you know, the other professional development times that we have, that becomes an integration. And I think our responsibility from a district standpoint to reinforce that equity work is high quality instruction, and this is what it looks like, and here's some resources that you can have. I think, you know, my reflection has been we need to be much more articulate and clear in reinforcing that as we're moving forward, as being very specific and pragmatic about our approaches. Because we have done some, you know, it hasn't been all lecture, we've done some workshop work as we've done it, but just to be able to reinforce that more, I think will be important.
And then, like, I guess the two pieces that I'd like to see you bring back, Brian, are, I mean, specific things, are one, kind of the question that I already asked him about just how we evaluate professional development. I think, kind of going back to what Emily just said, like, surveys are one way to do it, but I think there's probably other ways to, like, get at, you know, like, either subjectively or objectively, like, what's happening, right, in the
Sure.
classroom. And then the other thing that I think we heard pretty clearly is the desire to have administrators be in their classrooms more often. And so if you can come back to us and tell us, like, how, one, you're gonna, what your how you're gonna do that, I guess.
Sure.
Or how you will know that's happening.
Yeah, from a measurement
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, sure.
So, I mean, I guess I brought that point up about the kind of writing, like, saying something is because and this could just be my feeling, is that I don't know, I feel like I can't end the year like this, like, whatever this is. Whatever, you know, 10:30 at night, I'm tired, whatever, but, you know, and I think I'd like the board to say something.
Yeah.
So, we can decide how we wanna do that, we can write something. Okay.
And you said we could talk about today?
Yeah.
Probably, okay, so today there was a couple, questions about, I think we all wanted to hear about the plan for Mr. Carvel's replacement or the second library position, because there was some concern about what that person's role is and whether they're technology focused or book focused, really, I guess. Tell me if I'm mischaracterizing this. And then what, if there is a shift in roles, like if that person's not just gonna be a straight up librarian, you know, where was the input from parents or teachers? What's our long-term plan in terms of library services? I think both in the context of those positions changing and the planned referendum facilities work. And then with cell phones at SIS, I think I'm interested in just what, if anything, could be done to more consistently enforce the current policy. If staff or administrators would recommend a change in policy that the board needs to take action on.
Well, so I was gonna, for
Or-
that one, I
yeah.
was gonna ask, like, when is Mickey bringing the next technology plan?
I'd have to go back and look at the work
Because I
plan.
think, so to me, there's two things there. One is, a curricular, like, like digital citizenship, that I know he's working on as part of the technology plan.
Right.
The other is, and it sounded to me like, Mike Joint has had a lot of conversations around the SIS, cell phone policy plan with concerned parents.
Okay.
It also sounded to, well, I guess, I don't, but I didn't get a clear sense of what his response about the enforcement of it is.
His response was that we have a policy.
Right, I mean, you know, I think, so here's the thing about that, like, I guess, I mean, I'm assuming, I'm gonna assume that he has a reason why that some teachers follow it and some teachers don't. But maybe that just needs to be, I mean, either then maybe you just don't need the policy. I don't know. Like,
Was
I guess.
that was feedback coming from parents?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like I mean, I know that to be true too,
Okay.
but, so there's a lot of discretion, I guess, in how
Sure.
that policy is implemented in the classroom level. But I guess there's probably a rationale for that.
Yeah, I
that-
mean, I'd have to go back
that I
and ask
didn't-
him. And
That we don't know what his rationale is, so.
Or there's not a rationale and it's sort of evolved badly. Which is also
It's just easier
Is it-
to let kids.
well, let me. Why don't
Well,
let
no,
me?
I don't
let me,
know if that's
yeah,
true.
Yeah, let me
Yeah.
go back and investigate that with
Yeah,
Mike.
I don't
and then be
think
able
there's any reason
be
to
able
think that
bring
he wouldn't,
bring that back.
you know.
Well, if there is a policy that's not being enforced, then it sounds like then there's an unofficial policy that it's not being enforced. So we need to reconcile those, right? Like either
Well, that
there
would.
should be a district policy, then, and maybe there is one, that if there's.
There is a district
teacher
policy.
Yes.
Right, but at SIS, it sounds like SHS, it's teacher discretion, and SIS, that's not the case on the books, but it's the case in practice.
So I can go back and
Right.
kind of look at that, and so, you know, if there's policy that's not being followed, then that would need to be something that would need to be reinforced, you know, through the principal to staff, and what conversations they've had, I'm not sure, so.
Yeah.
That's something I can go back and take a look at for SIS.
Okay. And then the
So-
last was, oh, go ahead.
So the SIS piece, is there anything on the technology?
Well, I just think that it brings up like the larger kind of conversation about like, you know, I guess, you know, my feeling is that we're like, the idea that 7th and 8th graders and 6th graders and 5th graders and even 4th graders are gonna have technology is like that, they're going to have technology. And so the question, I think, from a district standpoint is like, how do we teach them to be responsible about using that technology? And where does that fall into the curriculum? And responsible, one of the questions there that came up tonight was, you know, like, how do you not use your, you know, bullying, taking privacy issues, I don't know, like, to me, like, all the.
Respect, being a good citizen.
Respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like, just being a good human
Like-
being,
Like
honestly.
carrying your code of conduct
Yeah.
online.
It's digital
Right.
citizenship.
Right.
It's
And-
like
Right.
citizenship, but it also
Yeah.
just ties into wellness, character net, like, but that's like a curricular, like, that's a whole other thing about, like, the fact that technology is here and how we use
Right.
it. And then the separate question of like, can we ask students not to be on their phone during class?
Right.
Well, we can, right? We
Well,
certainly can.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Or during
So is there
COVID.
something that you want me to investigate as far as like the
Why
digital
isn't the policy,
citizenship?
Yeah.
well, I would like to know why the policy isn't being enforced.
Right, that's the SIS,
that's-
like
Yeah.
the cell
One.
phone piece.
And then
Right, so
I'd
I've
just
got
be interested
that.
to know today, where does digital citizenship show up in our curriculum in terms of like, I'm assuming that would be
Cause
guidance.
it's come up in the
And
technology
then-
plan, so I guess what we don't know
And
is
the
like,
techno-
where
How's
is it
that being
being implemented?
So where are we with digital citizenship
Yep.
from a curriculum?
From a curriculum
Where we teach that,
standpoint.
yeah.
Okay,
Where are we today and where are we going if it's in the technology plan?
that I can do.
Cool. There was a couple other things from that linkage that we tracked last week about potential policy changes that the board should look at, like in terms of personnel, should that be under like future agenda items?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring those, I think I should need to bring them back.
Okay.
We have to have it like, do it at a board meeting, so.
Yep.
And then one last thing about the technology plan. During our fall linkage with the teachers, we got, it was the linkage maybe a year ago where they said they had not had ample input or any input on the technology plan. And you went back and you brought that to the director's attention. And when we met with the SEA for a follow-up linkage and asked, how has that progressed? They said, we got the thumbs up that they had input. But then at the meeting where we had more than just the executive board, we heard from a teacher who is very passionate about and very, I think she's been a part of those discussions, who feels like some important voices have not been heard. And there's some dismissing of some of those voices, so we can talk about that, but that seems to be, I guess that raised some questions for me, because we had heard at the follow-up linkage with the SEA that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a board member, like before I'm, signing off on resources toward new technology or some long-term plan, like I wanna see who had input and feel super confident that the teacher in every building is like, I'm on board with this, and that work group that was established was legit and not just like, here's the plan, you can read it for yourself. Because what we heard is more like they're being handed the plan, not.
And that raises the ongoing challenge, because we can't meet with all teachers at all times.
Right.
So we lean on.
But there was a
our
work group.
linkages. Right, we lean on, so wrapping back around with that on the technology plan will be important.
Sure.
Make sure
So when that comes
that-
up on the.
Sure.
But, I mean, that just highlighted the fact that, like, we heard something in one place and then we heard something else in another
Right.
place, and we don't know, like, how those
And
things
it's
go
the
together.
both groups that, the teacher groups, but, so.
And then the last thing we heard tonight was just around, like, I think I already brought this up to Tim, this having MAC and more information about MAC and single age available, and, just I think, again, just being more transparent about, like, what that means, what that looks like, why you
Yes,
pick.
specifically, that wasn't about is Tim still here? Is he?
He's somewhere.
He
there.
might be napping over there.
Yeah.
It wasn't about I don't think it was really about the conversation this year about the changes that needed to be
Right.
made. It was more
Actually, it
about.
wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, it was more about just explaining to K4 and K5 parents what's coming and what are the choices, and, yeah, more information about that.
Well, I thought that was an interesting comment, given that this year there was more information than previous years.
Mhm.
So we've made some headway, right, but.
Yeah.
Well, and even the point that the document you prepared would be helpful, just history of it, right,
Context.
in context,
Yeah.
would be helpful to put in a place that's available to everybody.
Because it was well done.
Okay. Okay, anything else? All right, so now we have a board action agenda item. I will take a motion.
I move that we approve the board action agenda.
Can you actually,
Could you say what that
can you
is?
say what it
Yeah.
is?
New bylaw.
Yeah, I move that we approve, for the approval of the board bylaw 125, student representative to the school board.
I second that motion.
Okay, so this is kind of, I put the bylaw, I gave it a number. This is the bylaw that I presented, or that we discussed at the last meeting. So the goal would be to, if we approve it tonight, starting tomorrow, Tim would start, we talked to Tim about recruiting, and if you know any rising sophomores, juniors, rising freshmen, sophomores or juniors who'd be interested, the idea is that we would get these two individuals on board sometime in June to start in September, so we're gonna have to have some conversations about, like, the interview committees and things like that, but, we need to just at least approve this part of it, and then they can fill out the application, so. Everybody good with that? Maybe having students on
I'm
here
super
will.
excited about it. I'm feeling bad right now.
Well,
So I'm
I was like, we
oh,
probably
this
won't be able to
send me home
have
at
to make sure we
midnight.
limit our meetings to, this
Yes.
is way too late for a student to be out.
Yeah.
Late for us.
I know. Well, teachers report in
A
like
bedtime bylaw?
7 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
So.
any other, discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Motion carries 5-0. We have a new, all right, board consent agenda?
I move that we approve the board consent agenda.
I second it.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you again to the Shorewood Historical Society for their generous donation. Public comments? Thank you for staying with us.
Right, no problem. What I wanted to do is just kind of echo on something that you had mentioned about addressing the community. I think that that's a great idea. I think that that's the missing piece to the puzzle. So we've heard from, the superintendent, we've heard from principals, but we haven't heard from the school board in terms of, the district strategic plan is talking about equity, and that's one of the focal points in this, the strategic plan is equity as well as wellness, and I think it's important to hear from the school board, because if that's what we're saying the district is focusing on, and to your point, Pablo, equity has to do with teaching. And if you have an educator that does not understand that, then that's a tall tale that's saying that the PD that is currently being presented is lacking in this area if teachers are not feeling that they are equipped to carry out lessons and they're not making the connection of equity. The other thing is I have a concern about teaching discourse or teaching students how to work through problems of discourse, meaning that you don't have to agree, but that's a skill that has to be explicitly taught. And as of right now, it's not a skill that's being taught. That's leading to frustration as I've met with other student groups. Another point is the race works. I talked to student groups about race work. I talked to teachers about race work. And students are kind of like, well, if it's happening, then they're not necessarily seeing it in the classrooms across the board. And so if we're saying that we're doing race works for 3 years, then how are we evaluating its effectiveness? And then allowing teachers to be honest about it and not being penalized for being honest. So, and teachers will be honest if they don't feel like they're going to be scrutinized and beat up on or in jeopardy or being reprimanded. Because I too came to the linkage and I just listened to how teachers are talking about, and a lot of it is about the structure of the day. So in other districts, teachers have mandated reporting times, and then your professional development is embedded. Well, here in Shorewood, teachers have flexibility in terms of their day is not told what to do versus an NPS, you report either an hour before school to collaborate with colleagues, or you're staying an hour later to collaborate. But that's not structurally happening in Shorewood. And so one of the things that I heard teachers echo a lot was that on those Wednesdays, those early release days, say that there's time that they would love to collaborate and do curriculum planning, but it's so structured where they're not able to collaborate, or that certain topics are not being discussed that they would like. So I'm just wondering if the board could have a way, or have, a way that work with the superintendent to see what does that look like? And what's the feedback from RaceWorks as well as from students? And the other thing is we have a great social studies department. Middle school and high school, they could lead the charge, or you could have them be the equity champions, if you will, and then to work with colleagues, because that's a lot of it. We have great leadership, or some really great teachers that would be willing to present in district, but haven't been given the opportunity to share. And I know particularly the SIS Social Studies Department, they spend a lot of their own personal time planning. So perhaps that's an area, a group the social studies department is a group that you would want to tap into to get feedback from them as well, because they do work very hard in terms of equity practices, and they've been trained in social studies, and so that would be another group of teachers to extend the olive branch and ask them how it could look in terms of professional development, especially on those half days.
Thank you.
I think that's all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay. To-do items.
So I have one touch base with Veda and Tim to talk about the alumni who are back home from college, to get them to maybe be part of our student achievement piece, and some reflections that we've done in the past. Second meeting in June, we'll target for that. Sarah McEnany is going to send out a PDF of the seed grants, so I can just feed that to you when I get that. Looking at the evaluation process for PD, and translating that into how's that resulting in some action in the classroom, figuring out our process for that. Administrators in classrooms, measures, and then touching base with Mike Joint on the cell phone policy and consistency, reinforcement of that at SIS, and then talking to Mickey about digital citizenship in the curriculum and how that fits within our plans. So those are the things that I had for to-dos.
Okay, and then for mine, I have scheduling a facilities meeting, probably with having Marta by phone, and having a conversation. I think there's a lot of things that we have tabled from maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago we want to talk about in terms of facilities, maybe including something from Myron and EEUA. So, and maybe doing it after the design workshop so we can kind of debrief that as well. Thinking about doing kind of some, so the board's gonna potentially do, I guess, talk about the equity trainings that we're gonna go to, and then talk about how we might figure out a way to debrief that and bring that into policy. For future agendas, I'm gonna bring back some of the OEs that we talked about in closed session, 1, 3, and 4, the ones I have on my list, to discuss some of the indicators that we have, and then I guess I'll probably draft an end of year letter and then send it to you guys that we can, I guess, discuss it at the next meeting. Because we will have, it'll be 1 day before the end of the year.
Then I would add, when you're discussing with Mickey about the role of digital citizenship and the curriculum, also having a broader discussion on the role of the media specialist. And because there's gonna be a replacement hired, as Emily was saying before, and there's concern about what will these spaces look like. Will they be completely book-free?
Well, and not
Hopefully
just the physical spaces, but the time of the library media specialist, right? That was part of it.
Time of the position.
Well, right. Is that person in the library? Is that person in classrooms? Is that person supposed to be teaching technology? Those were sort of some
What
of the
that role is.
concerns. I'm sorry.
Right,
to
no,
interrupt. But yeah,
I
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, my broader concern is like, what's driving those decisions? Like, is
Yeah.
that based on our technology plan that we haven't seen yet? Is that based on our teacher feedback or parent feedback or strategic plan? What's driving that?
Okay.
That, yeah.
And then I just want to confirm, so we all get tickets to graduation. How does that
Correct.
handled again?
So that should be done through our office. So
Somebody
Feda-
else send us an email, or we need to reach out to Feda?
So Feda, why don't we can have Feda do that. So Feda can send
So
an
it's
email
June
out to
9th
be
at
able
what
to-
time?
to do that. June 9th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay. Okay. And then all of you should have gotten, this is like a planning thing, you should have gotten an email about the 4th of July from,
Right.
please respond to her. And
Well,
let her know
I-
if you're gonna
yeah.
participate.
Do we get helmets? If we're
Do we
walking?
get
Sorry.
Are you
I-
worried?
Pretty
You get-
hot.
you get worried
You
about
buy your
falling
own
out with
candy,
people?
you sometimes can jump on somebody's car, but they have you like,
No,
you
no,
know.
usually, well, I've only done it once. Would this be something we could, like, I don't know.
I'm just saying, just please respond to her, so she knows, like, cause they're already organizing it, so.
My question though, before it's just like the 5 of us, 6 of us walking around giving out candy or pencils, like, do we want to, and I think the SEA walks, do we wanna walk like with families and schools, like, you know.
Us with the elected leaders.
Yeah.
I know, but I guess I don't need to be called.
And you don't have to give out candy. Lance last year was gonna give out condoms,
Okay.
public health.
I was
Okay.
talking about that.
I'd said like, I don't know for
Yeah.
sure, but I mean, look at Tim Joy's face. Yeah.
All right, we're
He's
gonna
jealous.
slap
All
happy.
right.
So, yeah. We
All
can
right, so
decide.
do the elected
You need to
leaders.
tell her though.
Yeah,
That's what
sure.
my point
I'll-
is.
I'll walk.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And we are adjourned. Or,
We didn't do
recess.
future agenda items.
sorry, future agenda.
That's,
Everything
Okay,
you
I have
listed
one.
on your
Yes.
copy.
that, apologies in advance if this seems out of left field, but I would like an update, this could be in a couple months if that works better, but, the Meet the Match projects, so that'd be Project Lead the Way, EL, Team Awesome, there was some K-12 stuff, I was just, that ran across this. And I have some idea of what happened to some of that stuff, but I would like, and I feel like maybe you guys would also appreciate this, like an update on the spending, like, you know, where all that money went, what was done, like, what was accomplished, what's still in place, what's still in, you know, like EL, we kind of know.
So that, is
Just-
that specifically from the
Meet the
$1
Match.
million match?
Yeah,
Or
like.
the $500,000 match?
Yeah, that whole campaign, like what, you know, resulted in it, just as a follow-up, cause I realized, so this stemmed from, running across something about Project Lead the Way, and I realized I don't really know where that stands, cause I know we lost both of those teachers, so, but then there's
We
still the
still do it.
space, so I don't, yeah. I just didn't know, and so I
Sure.
would love to hear, and I felt like, wow, a lot of people contributed to that, I bet a lot of people would like to know how that all played out, and
Okay.
that's all.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine. We can put, Ted and I will have that.
thank you. Okay. Now in recess?